His scimitars charged out relentlessly and in perfect harmony, pressing the two gray dwarfs back on their heels. Each arm worked its own opponent, keeping the gray dwarfs rooted in place squarely in front of Drizzt. If one of his enemies managed to get around to his side, the drow knew, he would be in serious trouble. Each scimitar swipe brought a ring of metal, and each passing second gave Drizzt more understanding of his opponent's abilities and attack strategies. Out in the Underdark, Drizzt had fought blindly many times, once even donning a hood against the basilisk he'd met. Overwhelmed by the sheer speed of the drow's attacks, the Duergar could only work their swords back and forth and hope that a scimitar didn't slide through. The blade sang and rang as the two Duergar frantically parried and dodged. Then came a sound that Drizzt had hoped for, the sound of a scimitar digging into flesh. A moment later, one sword clanged to the stone, and its wounded wielder made the fatal mistake of crying out in pain. Drizzt's hunter self rose to the surface at that moment and focused on that cry, and his scimitar shot straight ahead, smashing into the gray dwarf's teeth and on through the back of its head. The hunter turned on the remaining Duergar in fury. Around and around his blade spun in swirling circular motions, around and around, then one shot out in a sudden straightforward thrust, too quickly for a blocking response. It caught the Duergar in the shoulder, giving a deep wound. "Give! Give!" the gray dwarf cried, not desiring the same fate as its companion. Drizzt heard another sword drop to the floor. "Please, drow elf!" At the Duergar's words, the drow buried his instinctive urges. "I accept your surrender," Drizzt replied, and he moved close to his opponent, putting the tip of his scimitar to the gray dwarf's chest. Together they walked out of the area darkened by Drizzt's spell. Searing agony ripped through Clacker's head, every blow sending waves of pain. The hook-horror gurgled out an animal's growl and exploded into furious motion, heaving up from the crushed Duergar and spinning over at the newest foes. A Duergar club smashed in again, but Clacker was beyond any sensation of pain. A heavy claw bashed through the purple outline, through the invisible Duergar's skull. The gray dwarf came back into view suddenly, the concentration needed to maintain a state of invisibility stolen by death, the greatest thief of all. The remaining Duergar turned to flee, but the enraged hook-horror moved faster. Clacker caught the gray dwarf in a claw and hoisted him into the air. Screeching like a frenzied bird, the hook-horror hurled the unseen opponent into the wall. The Duergar came back into sight, broken and crumbled at the base of the stone wall. No opponent stood to face the hook-horror, but Clacker's savage hunger was far from satiated. Drizzt and the wounded Duergar emerged from the darkness then, and the hook-horror barreled in. With the specter of Belwar's combat taking his attention, Drizzt did not realize Clacker's intent until the Duergar prisoner screamed in terror. By then it was too late. Drizzt watched his prisoner's head go flying back into the globe of darkness. "Clacker!" the drow screamed in protest. Then Drizzt ducked and dived backward for his own life as the other claw came viciously swinging across. Spotting new prey nearby, the hook-horror didn't follow the drow into the globe. Belwar and the dagger-wielding Duergar were too engaged in their own struggles to notice the approaching crazed giant. Clacker bent low, collected the prone combatants in his huge arms, and heaved them both straight up into the air. The Duergar had the misfortune of coming down first, and Clacker promptly batted it across the chamber. Belwar would have found a similar fate, but crossed scimitars intercepted the hook-horror's next blow. The giant's strength slid Drizzt back several feet, but the parry softened the blow enough for Belwar to fall by. Still, the Burrow Warden crashed heavily into the floor and spent a long moment too dazed to react.
Christopher.
"Clacker!" Drizzt cried again, as a giant foot came up with the obvious intent of squashing Belwar flat. Needing all his speed and agility, Drizzt dived around to the back of the hook-horror, dropped to the floor, and went for Clacker's knees, as he had in their first encounter. Trying to stomp on the prone Zwerfneblin, Clacker was already a bit off balance, and Drizzt easily tripped him to the stone. In the blink of an eye, the drow warrior sprang atop the monster's chest and slipped a scimitar tip between the armored folds of Clacker's neck. Drizzt dodged a clumsy swing as Clacker continued to struggle. The drow hated what he had to do, but then the hook-horror calmed suddenly and looked up at him with sincere understanding. Do it, came a garbled demand. Drizzt, horrified, glanced over to Belwar for support. Back on his feet, the burrow warden just looked away.
I'll be right back.
Clacker?
Then I had a camera back on.
Drizzt asked the hookar. Are you Clacker once again? The monster hesitated. Then the beaked head nodded slightly. Drizzt sprang away and looked at the carnage in the chamber. Let us leave, he said. Clacker remained prone a moment longer, considering the grim implications of his reprieve. With the battle's conclusion, the hookhar's side backed out of its full control of Clacker's consciousness. Those savage instincts lurked, Clacker knew, not far from the surface, waiting for another opportunity to find a firm hold. How many times would the faltering Petch side be able to fight those instincts? Clacker slammed the stone, a mighty blow that sent cracks running through the chamber's floor. With great effort, the weary giant climbed to his feet. In his embarrassment, Clacker didn't look at his companions, but just stormed away down the tunnel, each banging footstep falling like a hammer on a nail in Drizzt Do'Urden's heart. Perhaps you should have finished it, Dark Elf, Belwar suggested, moving beside his drow friend. He saved my life in the Illithid cavern, Drizzt retorted sharply, and has been a loyal friend. He tried to kill me and you, the deep gnome said grimly. Maga Camera. I am his friend, Drizzt growled, grabbing his
How you doing,
shoulder.
Chris? Hope you're doing
You
well.
asked me to kill him? I asked you to act as his friend, retorted Belwar, and he pulled free of the grasp and started away down the tunnel after Clacker. Drizzt grabbed the burrow warden's shoulder again and roughly spun him around. It will only get worse, Dark Elf, Belwar said calmly into Drizzt's grimace. A firmer hold does the wizard's spell gain with every passing day. Clacker will try to kill us again, I fear, and if he succeeds, the realization of the act will destroy him more fully than your blades ever could. I cannot kill him, Drizzt said, and he was no longer angry. Nor can you. Then we must leave him, the deep gnome replied. We must let Clacker go free in the Underdark, to live his life as a hookar. That surely is what he will become, body and spirit. No, said Drizzt, we must not leave him. We are his only chance. We must help him. The wizard is dead, Belwar reminded him, and the deep gnome turned away and started again after Clacker. There are other wizards, Drizzt replied under his breath, this time making no move to impede the burrow warden. The drow's eyes narrowed, and he snapped his scimitars back into their sheaths. Drizzt knew what he must do, what price his friendship with Clacker demanded, but he found the thought too disturbing to accept. There were indeed other wizards in the Underdark, but chance meetings were far from common, and wizards capable of dispelling Clacker's polymorphed state would be fewer still. Drizzt knew where such wizards could be found, though. The thought of returning to his homeland haunted Drizzt with every step he and his companions took that day. Having viewed the consequences of his decision to leave Menzoberranzan, Drizzt never wanted to see the place again, never wanted to look upon the dark world that had so damned him. But if he chose now not to return, Drizzt knew that he would soon witness a more wicked sight than Menzoberranzan. He would watch Clacker, a friend who had saved him from certain death, degenerate fully into a hookar. Belwar had suggested abandoning Clacker, and that course seemed preferable to the battle that Drizzt and the Deep Gnome surely must fight if they were near Clacker when the degeneration became complete. Even if Clacker were far removed, though, Drizzt knew that he would witness the degeneration. His thoughts would stay on Clacker, the friend he had abandoned, for the rest of his days, just one more pain for the tormented drow. In all the world, Drizzt could think of nothing he desired less than viewing the sights of Menzoberranzan or conversing with his former people. Given the choice, he would prefer death over returning to the drow city. But the choice was not so simple. It hinged on more than Drizzt's personal desires. He had founded his life on principles, and those principles now demanded loyalty. They demanded that he put Clacker's needs above his own desires, because Clacker had befriended him, and because the concept of true friendship far outweighed personal desires. Later on, when the friends had set camp for a short
Oh
rest,
shit, hell yeah, at least you got
Belwar
that out
noticed
of the
that
way,
Drift was
fire.
engaged in some inner conflict.
Oh, my day wasn't too
Even
bad. I
Clacker,
can't
who
complain
once
none.
again was tapping at the stone wall. The Zwerfneblin moved cautiously by the drow's side. Belwar cocked his head curiously. "What are you thinking, Dark Elf?" Drizzt, too caught up in his emotional turbulence, did not return Belwar's gaze. "My homeland boasts a school of wizardry," Drizzt replied with steadfast determination. At first, the Burrow Warden didn't understand what Drizzt hinted at, but then, when Drizzt glanced over to Clacker, Belwar realized the implications of Drizzt's simple statement. "Menzo Baranzon?" the Zwerfneblin cried. "You would return there, hoping that some dark elf wizard would show mercy upon our pet friend?" "I would return there because Clacker has no other chance," Drizzt retorted angrily. "Then no chance at all has Clacker," Belwar roared. "Maga Camera, Dark Elf. Menzo Baranzon will not be so quick to welcome you." "Perhaps your pessimism will prove valid," said Drizzt. "Dark elves are not moved by mercy, I agree, but there may be other options." "You are hunted," Belwar said. His tone showed that he hoped his simple words would shake some sense into his drow companion. "By Matron Malice," Drizzt retorted. "Menzo Baranzon is a large place, my little friend, and loyalties to my mother will play no part in any encounter we find beyond those with my own family. I assure you that I have no plans to meet anyone from my own family." "And what, Dark Elf, might we offer in exchange for dispelling Clacker's curse?" Belwar replied sarcastically. "What have we to offer that any Dark Elf wizard of Menzo Baranzon would value?" This reply started with a blurring cut of a scimitar, was heightened by a familiar simmering fire in the drow's lavender eyes, and ended with a simple statement that even stubborn Belwar could not find the words to refute. "The wizard's life." 23. Ripples. Matron Beanry took a long and careful scan of Malice Do'Urden, measuring how greatly the trials of Zincarla had weighed on the matron mother. Deep lines of worry creased Malice's once smooth face, and her stark white hair, which had been the envy of her generation, was, for one of the very few times in 5 centuries, frazzled and unkempt. Most striking, though, were Malice's eyes, once radiant and alert, but now dark with weariness and sunken in the sockets of her dark skin. "Zaknafein almost had him," Malice explained, her voice an uncharacteristic whine. "Drizzt was in his grasp, and yet somehow my son managed to escape. But the spirit wraith is close on his trail again," Malice quickly added, seeing Matron Beanry's disapproving frown. In addition to being the most powerful figure in all of Menzo Baranzon, the withered matron mother of House Beanry was considered Lolth's personal representative in the city. Matron Beanry's approval was Lolth's approval, and by the same logic, Matron Beanry's disapproval most often spelled disaster for a house. "Zincarla requires patience, Matron Malice," Matron Beanry said calmly. "It has not been so long." Malice relaxed a bit, until she looked again at her surroundings. She hated the chapel of House Beanry, so huge and demeaning. The entire Do'Urden complex could fit within this single chamber, and if Malice's family and soldiers were multiplied 10 times over, they still would not fill the rows of benches. Directly above the central altar, directly above Matron Malice, loomed the illusionary image of a gigantic spider, shifting into the form of a beautiful drow female, then back again into an arachnid.
Let me go get my little
Sitting here
tab
alone
rig. I
with
think I got a
Matron
little bit in
Beanry,
there.
under that overpowering image, made Malice feel even more insignificant. Matron Beanry sensed her guest's uneasiness and moved to comfort her. "You have been given a great gift," she said sincerely. The Spider Queen would not bestow Zincarla, and would not have accepted the sacrifice of Sinefe Hannet, a matron mother, if she did not approve of your methods and your intent. It is a trial, Malice replied offhandedly. A trial you will not fail, Matron Beanry retorted. And then the glories you will know, Malice Do'Urden. When the spirit wraith of he who was Acnophane has completed his task, and your renegade son is dead, you will sit in honor on the ruling council. Many years, I promise you, will pass before any house will dare to threaten House Do'Urden. The Spider Queen will shine her favor upon you for the proper completion of Zincarla. She will hold your house in the highest regard and will defend you against rivals. What if Zincarla fails? Malice dared to ask. Let us suppose. Her voice trailed away as Matron Beanry's eyes widened in shock. Speak not the words, Beanry scolded, and think not of such impossibilities. You grow distracted by fear, and that alone will spell your doom. Zincarla is an exercise of willpower and a test of your devotion to the Spider Queen. The Spirit Wraith is an extension of your faith and your strength. If you falter in your trust, then the Spirit Wraith of Acnophane will falter in his quest. I will not falter, Malice roared, her hands clenched around the armrests of her chair. I accept the responsibility of my son's sacrilege, and with Lolth's help and blessings, I will enact the appropriate punishment upon Drizzt. Matron Beanry relaxed back in her seat and nodded her approval. She had to support Malice in this endeavor, by the command of Lolth, and she knew enough of Zincarla to understand that confidence and determination were two of the primary ingredients for success. A matron mother involved in Zincarla had to proclaim her trust in Lolth and her desire to please Lolth often and sincerely. Now, though, Malice had another problem, a distraction she could ill afford. She had come to House Beanry of her own volition, seeking aid. Then of this other matter, Matron Beanry prompted, fast growing tired of the meeting. I am vulnerable, Malice explained. Zincarla steals my energy and attention. I fear that another house may seize the opportunity. No house has ever attacked a matron mother in the thralls of Zincarla, Matron Beanry pointed out, and Malice realized that the withered old drow spoke from experience. Zincarla is a rare gift, Malice replied, given to powerful matrons with powerful houses, almost assuredly in the highest favor of the Spider Queen. Who would attack under such circumstances? But House Do'Urden is far different. We have just suffered the consequences of war. Even with the addition of some of House Hannet's soldiers, we are crippled. It is well known that I have not yet regained Lolth's favor, but that my house is 8th in the city, putting me on the ruling council, an enviable position. Your fears are misplaced, Matron Beanry assured her. But Malice slumped back in frustration in spite of the words. Matron Beanry shook her head helplessly. I see that my words alone cannot soothe. Your attention must be on Zincarla. Understand that, Malice Do'Urden. You have no time for such petty worries. Remain, said Malice, and I will end them. Beanry. Return to your house now, in the company of 200 Beanry soldiers. The numbers will secure your battlements, and my soldiers shall wear the house emblem of Beanry. None in the city will dare to strike with such allies. A wide smile rolled across Malice's face, a grin that diminished a few of those worry lines. She accepted Matron Beanry's generous gift as a signal that perhaps Lolth still did favor House Do'Urden. Go back to your home and concentrate on the task at hand, Matron Beanry continued. Acnophane must find Drizzt again and kill him. That is the deal you offer to the Spider Queen. But fear not for the Spirit Wraith's last failure or the time lost. A few days or 10 days is not very long in Lolth's eyes. The proper conclusion of Zincarla is all that matters. You will arrange for my escort? Malice asked, rising from her chair. It is already waiting, Matron Beanry assured her. Malice watched down from the raised central dais and out through the many rows of the giant chapel. The huge room was dimly lit, and Malice could barely see, as she exited, another figure moving toward the central dais from the opposite direction. She assumed it to be Matron Beanry's companion Illithid, a common figure in the great chapel. If Malice had known that Matron Beanry's mind flayer had left the city on some private business in the west, she might have paid more heed to the distant figure. Her worry levels would have increased tenfold. Pitiful, Jarlaxle remarked, as he ascended to sit beside Matron Beanry. This is not the same Matron Malice Do'Urden that I knew only a few short months ago. Zincarla is not cheaply given, Matron Beanry replied. The toll is great, Jarlaxle agreed. He looked straight at Matron Beanry, reading her eyes as well as her forthcoming reply. Will she fail? Matron Beanry chuckled aloud, a laugh that sounded more like a wheeze. Even the Spider Queen could only guess at the answer. Our soldiers should lend Matron Malice enough comfort to complete the task. That is my hope, at least. Malice Do'Urden once was in Lolth's highest regard, you know. Her seat on the ruling council was demanded by the Spider Queen. Events do seem to lead to the completion of Lolth's will, Jarlaxle snickered, remembering the battle between House Do'Urden and House Hunnet, in which Bregan the Earth had played the pivotal role. The consequences of that victory, the elimination of House Hunnet, had put House Do'Urden in the city's 8th position, and thus had placed Matron Malice on the ruling council. Fortunes smile on the favored, Matron Beanry remarked. Jarlaxle's grin was replaced by a suddenly serious look. And is Malice, Matron Malice, he quickly corrected, seeing Beanry's immediate glower. Now in the Spider Queen's favor? Will fortune smile on House Do'Urden? The gift of Zincarla removed both favor and disfavor, I would assume, Matron Beanry explained. Matron Malice's fortunes are for her and her spirit wraith to determine, or for her son, this infamous Driz Do'Urden, to destroy, Jarlaxle conceded. Is this young warrior so very powerful? Why has Lolth not simply crushed him? He has forsaken the Spider Queen, Beanry replied, fully and with all his heart. Lolth has no power over Drizzt, and has determined him to be Matron Malice's problem. A rather large problem, it would seem, Jarlaxle chuckled with a quick shake of his bald head. The mercenary noticed immediately that Matron Beanry did not share his mirth. Indeed, she replied somberly, and her voice trailed off on the word as she sank back for some private thoughts. She knew the dangers and the possible profits of Zincarla better than anyone in the city. Twice before Matron Beanry had asked for the Spider Queen's greatest gift, and twice before she had seen Zincarla through to successful completion. With the unrivaled grandeur of House Beanry all about her, Matron Beanry could not forget the gains of Zincarla's success. But every time she saw her withered reflection in a pool or a mirror, she was vividly reminded of the heavy price. Jarlaxle did not intrude on the matron mother's reflections. The mercenary contemplated on his own at that moment. In a time of trial and confusion such as this, a skilled opportunist would find only gain. By Jarlaxle's reckoning, Bregan could only profit from the granting of Zincarla to Matron Malice. If Malice proved successful and reinforced her seat on the ruling council, Jarlaxle would have another very powerful ally within the city. If the Spirit Wraith failed, to the ruin of House Do'Urden, the price on this young Drizzt's head certainly would escalate to a level that might tempt the mercenary band. As she had on her journey to the first house of the city, Malice imagined ambitious gazes following her return through the winding streets of Menzoberranzan. Matron Beanry had been quite generous and gracious. Accepting the premise that the withered old matron mother was indeed Lolth's voice in the city, Malice could barely contain her smile. Undeniably, though, the fears still remained. How readily would Matron Beanry come to Malice's aid if Drizzt continued to elude Zaknafein, if Zincarla ultimately failed? Malice's position on the ruling council would be tenuous then, as would the continued existence of House Do'Urden. The caravan passed House Fay-Branch, ninth house of the city, and most probably the greatest threat to a weakened House Do'Urden. Matron Halavin Fay-Branch was no doubt watching the procession beyond her adamantite gates, watching the matron mother who now held the coveted 8th seat on the ruling council. Malice looked at Dinan and the 10 soldiers of House Do'Urden walking by her side as she sat atop the floating magical disc. She let her gaze wander to the 200 soldiers, warriors openly bearing the proud emblem of House Baenri, marching with disciplined precision behind her modest troop. What must Matron Halavin Fay-Branch be thinking at such a sight? Malice wondered. She could not contain her ensuing smile. Our greatest glories are soon to come, Malice assured her warrior son. Dinan nodded and returned the wide smile, wisely not daring to steal any of the joy from his volatile mother. Privately, though, Dinan couldn't ignore his disturbing suspicions that many of the Baenri soldiers, drow warriors he had never had the occasion to meet before, looked vaguely familiar. One of them even shot a sly wink at the elder boy of House Do'Urden. Jarlaxle's magical whistle, being blown on the balcony of House Do'Urden, came vividly to Dinan's mind. 24. Faith. Drizzt and Belwar did not have to remind each other of the significance of the green glow that appeared far ahead up the tunnel. Together they quickened their pace to catch up with and warn Clacker, who continued his approach with strides quickened by curiosity. The hook horror always led the party now. Clacker simply had become too dangerous for Drizzt and Belwar to allow him to walk behind. Clacker turned abruptly at their sudden approach, waved a claw menacingly, and hissed. "Patch," Belwar whispered, speaking the word he had been using to strike a recollection in his friend's fast-fading consciousness. The troop had turned back toward the east, toward Menzoberranzan, as soon as Drizzt had convinced the Burrow Warden of his determination to aid Clacker. Belwar, having no other options, had finally agreed with the Drow's plan as Clacker's only hope, but though they had turned immediately and had quickened their march, both now feared that they would not arrive in time. The transformation in Clacker had been dramatic since the confrontation with the Duergar. The hook horror could barely speak and often turned threateningly on his friends. "Patch," Belwar said again, as he and Drizzt neared the anxious monster. The hook horror paused, confused. "Patch!" Belwar growled a third time, and he tapped his hammer hand against the stone wall. As if a light of recognition had suddenly gone on within the turmoil that was his consciousness, Clacker relaxed and dropped his heavy arms to his sides. Drizzt and Belwar looked past the hook horror to the green glow and exchanged concerned glances. They had committed themselves fully to this course and had little choice in their actions now. "Corbies live in the chamber beyond," Drizzt began quietly, speaking each word slowly and distinctly to ensure that Clacker understood. "We have to go directly across and out the other side swiftly, for if we hope to avoid a battle, we have no time for delays. Take care in your steps. The only walkways are narrow and treacherous." The hook horror stammered futilely. "Clacker," Belwar offered. Clacker stopped suddenly and threw a claw out in the direction of the green glowing chamber. "Clacker lead," Drizzt said, unable to bear the hook horror struggling. "Clacker lead," Drizzt said again, seeing the great head bobbing in accord. Belwar didn't seem so sure of the wisdom of that suggestion. "We have fought the birdmen before and have seen their tricks," Svirfneblin reasoned, "but Clacker has not." "The sheer bulk of the hook horror should deter them," Drizzt argued. "Clacker's mere presence may allow us to avoid a fight." "Not against the Corbies, Dark Elf," said the Burrow Warden. "They will attack anything without fear. You witnessed their frenzy, their disregard for their own lives. Even your panther did not deter them." Perhaps you are right, Drizzt agreed. But even if the Corbies do attack, what weapons do they possess that could defeat a Hook-Horror's armor? What defense could the Birdmen offer against Clacker's great claws? Our giant friend will sweep them aside. You forget the Stone Riders up above, the Burrow Warden pointedly reminded him. They will be quick to take a ledge down and take Clacker with it. Clacker turned away from the conversation and stared into the stone of the walls in a futile effort to recapture a portion of his former self. He felt a slight urge to begin tapping on the stone, but it was no greater than his continuing urge to smash a claw into the face of either the Svirfneblin or the Drow. I will deal with any Corbies waiting above the ledges, Drizzt replied. You just follow Clacker across, a dozen paces behind. Belwar glanced over and noticed the mounting tension in the Hook-Horror. The Burrow Warden realized that they could not afford any delays, so he shrugged and pushed Clacker off, motioning down the passage toward the green glow. Clacker started away, and Drizzt and Belwar fell into step behind. The passage? Belwar whispered to Drizzt, turning into the last bend in the tunnel. Drizzt shook his head briskly, and Belwar, remembering Gwennevar's last painful episode in the Corby chamber, did not question him further. Drizzt patted the deep gnome on the shoulder for luck, then moved up past Clacker and was the first to enter the quiet chamber. With a few simple motions, the drow stepped into a levitation spell and floated silently up. Clacker, amazed by this strange place with the glowing reservoir below him, hardly noticed Drizzt's movements. The Hook-Horror stood perfectly still, glancing all about the chamber and using his keen sense of hearing to locate any possible enemies. Move, Belwar whispered behind him. Delay will bring disaster. Clacker started out tentatively, then picked up speed as he gained confidence in the strength of the narrow, unsupported walkway. He took the straightest course he could discern, but even this meandered about before it reached the exiting archway opposite the one they had entered. Do you see anything, Dark Elf? Belwar called as loudly as he dared a few uneventful moments later. Clacker had passed the midpoint of the chamber without incident, and the Burrow Warden could not contain his mounting anxiety. No Corbies had shown themselves, not a sound had been made beyond the heavy thumping of Clacker's feet and the shuffling of Belwar's worn boots. Drizzt floated back down to the ledge, far behind his companions. Nothing, he replied. The drow shared Belwar's suspicions that no dire Corbies were about. The hush of the acid-filled cavern was absolute and unnerving. Drizzt ran out toward the center of the chamber, then lifted off again in his levitation, trying to get a better angle on all of the walls. What do you see? Belwar asked him a moment later. Drizzt looked down to the Burrow Warden and shrugged. Nothing at all. Maga Camera, grumbled Belwar, almost wishing that a Corby would step out and attack. Clacker had nearly reached the targeted exit by this time, though Belwar, in his conversation with Drizzt, had lagged behind and remained near the center of the huge room. When the Burrow Warden finally turned back to the path ahead, the Hook-Horror had disappeared under the arch of the exit. Anything? Belwar called out to both of his companions. Drizzt shook his head and continued to rise. He rotated slowly about, scanning the walls, unable to believe that no Corbies lurked in ambush. Belwar looked back to the exit. We must have chased them out, he muttered to himself. But in spite of his words, the Burrow Warden knew better. When he and Drizzt had taken flight from this room a couple of 10 days before, they had left several dozen of the Birdmen behind them. Certainly the toll of a few dead Corbies would not have chased away the rest of the fearless clan. For some unknown reason, no Corbies had come out to stand against them. Belwar started off at a quick pace, thinking it best not to question their good fortune. He was about to call out to Clacker to confirm that the Hook-Horror had indeed moved to safety, when a sharp, terror-filled squeal rolled out from the exit, followed by a heavy crash. A moment later, Belwar and Drizzt had their answers. The spirit wraith of Zaknafein de Werden stepped under the arch and out onto the ledge. Dark Elf! The Burrow Warden called sharply. Drizzt had already seen the spirit wraith, and was descending as rapidly as he could toward the walkway near the middle of the chamber. "Clacker!" Belwar called, but he expected no answer, and received none from the shadows beyond the doorway. The spirit wraith steadily advanced. "You murderous beast!" the burrow warden cursed, setting his feet wide apart and slamming his mithril hands together. "Come out and get your due!" Belwar fell into his chant to empower his hands, but Drizzt interrupted him. "No," the drow cried out high above. "Zaknafein is here for me, not you. Move out of his way." "Was he here for Clacker?" Belwar yelled back. "A murderous beast he is, and I have a score to settle." "Do not know that," Drizzt replied, increasing his descent as fast as he dared to catch up to the fearless burrow warden. Drizzt knew that Zaknafein would get to Belwar first, and he could guess easily enough the grim consequences. "Trust me now, I beg," Drizzt pleaded. "This drow warrior is far beyond your abilities." Belwar banged his hands together again, but he could not honestly refute Drizzt's words. Belwar had seen Zaknafein in battle only that one time in the Illithid cavern, but the monster's blurring movements had stolen his breath. The deep gnome backed away a few steps and turned down a side walkway, seeking another route to the arched exit so that he might learn Clacker's fate. With Drizzt so plainly in sight, the spirit wraith paid the little Zwerfneblin no heed. Zaknafein charged right past the side walkway and continued on to fulfill the purpose of his existence. Belwar thought to pursue the strange drow, to close from behind and help Drizzt in the battle, but another cry issued from under the archway, a cry so pain-filled and pitiful that the burrow warden could not ignore it. He stopped as soon as he got back on the main walkway, then looked both ways, torn in his loyalties. "Go!" Drizzt shouted at him. "See to Clacker! This is Zaknafein, my father!" Drizzt noticed a slight hesitation in the spirit wraith's charge at the mention of those words, a hesitation that brought Drizzt a flicker of understanding. "Your father? Maga Camera, dark elf," Belwar protested. "Back in the Illithid cavern." "I am safe enough," Drizzt interjected. Belwar did not believe that Drizzt was safe at all, but against the protest of his own stubborn pride, the burrow warden realized that the battle that was about to begin was far beyond his abilities. He would be of little help against this mighty drow warrior, and his presence in the battle might actually prove detrimental to his friend. Drizzt would have a difficult enough time without worrying about Belwar's safety. Belwar banged his mithril hands together in frustration and rushed toward the archway and the continuing moans of his fallen hook-horror companion. Matron Malice's eyes widened, and she uttered a sound so primal that her daughters, gathered by her side in the anteroom, knew immediately that the spirit wraith had found Drizzt. Breeza glanced over at the younger Doerdan priestesses and dismissed them. Maya obeyed immediately, but Fierna hesitated. "Go," Breeza snarled, one hand dropping to the snake-headed whip on her belt. "Now!" Fierna looked to her matron mother for support, but Malice was quite lost in the spectacle of the distant events. This was the moment of triumph for Zincarla and for Matron Malice Doerdan. She would not be distracted by the petty squabbling of her inferiors. Breeza then was alone with her mother, standing behind the throne and studying Malice as intently as Malice watched Zaknafein. As soon as he entered the small chamber beyond the archway, Belwar knew that Clacker was dead, or soon would be. The giant hook-horror body lay on the floor, bleeding from a single but wickedly precise wound across the neck. Belwar began to turn away, then realized that he owed comfort at least to his fallen friend. He dropped to one knee and forced himself to watch as Clacker went into a series of violent convulsions. Death terminated the polymorph spell, and Clacker gradually reverted to his former self. The huge clawed arms trembled and jerked, twisted and popped into the long and spindly, yellow-skinned arms of a petch. Hair sprouted through the cracking armor of Clacker's head, and the great beak split apart and dissipated. The massive chest, too, fell away, and the whole body compacted with a grinding sound that sent shivers up and down the hardy burrow warden's spine. The hook-horror was no more, and in death, Clacker was as he had been. He was a bit taller than Belwar, though not nearly as wide, and his features were broad and strange, with pupilless eyes and a flattened nose. "What was your name, my friend?" the burrow warden whispered, though he knew that Clacker would never answer. He bent down and lifted the Petch's head in his arms, taking some comfort in the peace that had finally come to the tormented creature's face. "Who are you that takes the guise of my father?" Drizzt asked as the spirit wraith stalked across the last few paces. Zaknafein's snarl was indecipherable, and his response came more clearly in the hacking slice of a sword. Drizzt parried the attack and jumped back. "Who are you?" he demanded again. "You are not my father." A wide smile spread over the spirit wraith's face. "No," Zaknafein replied in a shaky voice, an answer that was inspired from an anteroom many miles away. "I am your mother." The swords came on again in a blinding flurry. Drizzt, confused by the response, met the charge with equal ferocity, and the many sudden hits of sword on scimitar sounded like a single ring. Breeza watched her mother's every movement. Sweat poured down Malice's brow, and her clenched fists pounded on the arms of her stone throne even after they had begun to bleed. Malice had hoped that it would be like this, but the final moment of her triumph would shine clearly in her thoughts from across the miles. She heard Drizzt's every frantic word and felt his distress so very keenly. Never had Malice known such pleasure.
Good, Christopher.
And she felt a
We should
slight
give you
twinge
something to
as
listen to while you
Zaknafein's
trip.
consciousness struggled against her control. Malice pushed Zaknafein aside with a guttural snarl. His animated corpse was her tool. Breeza noted her mother's sudden snarl with more than a passing interest. Drizzt knew beyond any doubt that this was not Zaknafein Do'Urden who stood before him, yet he could not deny the unique fighting style of his former mentor. Zaknafein was in there, somewhere, and Drizzt would have to reach him if he hoped to get any answers. The battle quickly settled into a comfortable, measured rhythm, both opponents launching cautious attack routines and paying careful attention to their tenuous footing on the narrow walkway. Belwar entered the room then, bearing Clacker's broken body. "Kill him, Drizzt!" the burrow warden cried. "Maga!" Belwar stopped and was afraid when he witnessed the battle. Drizzt and Zaknafein seemed to intertwine, their weapons spinning and darting, only to be parried away. They seemed as one, these two dark elves that Belwar had considered distinctly different, and that notion unnerved the deep gnome. When the next break came in the struggle, Drizzt glanced over to the burrow warden, and his gaze locked on the dead Petch. "Damn you," he spat, and he rushed back in, scimitars diving and chopping at the monster who had murdered Clacker. The spirit wraith parried the foolishly bold assault easily, and worked Drizzt's blades up high, rocking Drizzt back on his heels. This too seemed so very familiar to the young drow, a fighting approach that Zaknafein had used against him many times in their sparring matches back in Menzoberranzan. Zaknafein would force Drizzt high, then come in suddenly low with both of his swords. In their early contests, Zaknafein had often defeated Drizzt with this maneuver, the double thrust low, but in their last encounter in the Drow city, Drizzt had found the answering parry and had turned the attack against his mentor. Now Drizzt wondered if this opponent would follow through with the expected attack routine, and he wondered too how Zaknafein would react to his counter. Were any of Zak's memories within the monster he now faced? Still, the spirit wraith kept Drizzt's blades working defensively high. Zaknafein then took a quick step back and came in low with both blades. Drizzt dropped his scimitars into a downward X, the appropriate cross-down parry that pinned the attacking swords low. Drizzt kicked his foot up between the hilts of his blades and straight at his opponent's face. The spirit wraith somehow anticipated the countering attack and was out of reach before the boot could connect. Drizzt believed that he had an answer, for only Zaknafein Do'Urden could have known. "You are Zaknafein," Drizzt cried. "What has Malice done to you?" The spirit wraith's hands trembled visibly in their hold on the swords, and his mouth twisted as though he was trying to say something. "No!" Malice screamed, and she violently tore back the control of her monster, walking the delicate and dangerous line between Zaknafein's physical abilities and the consciousness of the being he once had been. "You are mine, Wraith!" Malice bellowed, "and by the will of Lolth you shall complete the task." Drizzt saw the sudden regression of the murderous spirit wraith. Zaknafein's hands no longer trembled, and his mouth locked into a thin and determined grimace once again. "What is it, Dark Elf?" Belwar demanded, confused by the strange encounter. Drizzt noticed that the deep gnome had placed Clacker's body on a ledge and was steadily approaching. Sparks flew from Belwar's mithril hands whenever they bumped together. "Stay back," Drizzt called to him. The presence of an unknown enemy could ruin the plans that were beginning to formulate in Drizzt's mind. "It is Zaknafain," he tried to explain to Belwar, "or at least a part of it is." In a voice too low for the Burrow Warden to hear, Drizzt added, "And I believe I know how to get to that part." Drizzt came on in a flurry of measured attacks that he knew Zaknafain could easily deflect. He did not want to destroy his opponent, but rather he sought to inspire other memories of fighting routines that would be familiar to Zaknafain. He put Zaknafain through the paces of a typical training session, talking all the while in the same way that he and the Weapon Master used to talk back in Menzoberranzan. Malice's spirit wraith countered Drizzt's familiarity with savagery and matched Drizzt's friendly words with animal-like snarls. If Drizzt thought he could lull his opponent with complacency, he was badly mistaken. Swords rushed at Drizzt inside and out, seeking a hole in his expert defenses. Scimitars matched their speed and precision, catching and stopping each arcing cut and deflecting every straightforward thrust harmlessly wide. A sword slipped through and nicked Drizzt in the ribs. His fine armor held back the weapon's razor edge, but the weight of the blow would leave a deep bruise. Rocked back on his heels, Drizzt saw that his plan would not be so easily executed. "You are my father," he shouted at the monster. "Matron Malice is your enemy, not I." The spirit wraith mocked the words with an evil laugh and came on wildly. From the very beginning of the battle, Drizzt had feared this moment, but now he stubbornly reminded himself that this was not really his father that stood before him. Zaknafain's careless offensive charge inevitably left gaps in his defenses, and Drizzt found them once and then again with his scimitars. One blade gashed a hole in the spirit wraith's belly, another slashed deeply into the side of his neck. Zaknafain only laughed again, louder, and came on. Drizzt fought in sheer panic, his confidence faltering. Zaknafain was nearly his equal, and Drizzt's blades barely hurt the thing. Another problem quickly became evident as well, for time was against Drizzt. He did not know exactly what it was that he faced, but he suspected that it would not tire. Drizzt pressed with all his skill and speed. Desperation drove him to new heights of swordsmanship. Belwar started out again to join him, but he stopped a moment later, stunned by the display. Drizzt hit Zaknafain several more times, but the spirit wraith seemed not to notice, and as Drizzt stepped up the tempo, the spirit wraith's intensity grew to match his own. Drizzt could hardly believe that this was not Zaknafain Do'Urden fighting against him. He could recognize the moves of his father and former mentor so very clearly. No other soul could move that perfectly muscled drow body with such precision and skill. Drizzt was backing away again, giving ground and waiting patiently for his opportunities. He reminded himself over and over that it was not Zaknafain that he faced, but some monster created by Matron Malice for the sole purpose of destroying him. Drizzt had to be ready. His only chance of surviving this encounter was to trip his opponent from the ledge. With the spirit wraith fighting so brilliantly, though, that chance seemed remote indeed. The walkway turned slightly around a short bend, and Drizzt felt it carefully with one foot, sliding it along. Then a rock right under Drizzt's foot broke free from the side of the walkway. Drizzt stumbled, and his leg to the knee slipped down beside the bridge. Zaknafain came upon him in a rush. The whirling sword soon had Drizzt down on his back across the narrow walkway, his head hanging precariously over the lake of acid. "Drizzt!" Belwar screamed helplessly. The deep gnome rushed out, though he could not hope to arrive in time or defeat Drizzt's killer. "Drizzt!" Perhaps it was that call of Drizzt's name, or maybe it was just the moment of the kill. But the former consciousness of Zaknafain flickered to life in that instant, and the sword arm, readied for a killing plunge that Drizzt could not have reflected, hesitated. Drizzt didn't wait for any explanations. He punched out with a scimitar hilt, then the other, both connecting squarely on Zaknafain's jaw and moving the spirit wraith back. Drizzt was up again, panting and favoring a twisted ankle. "Zaknafain!" Confused and frustrated by the hesitation, Drizzt screamed at his opponent. Driz. The spirit wraith's mouth struggled to reply.
Yeah.
Malice's monster rushed back in, sword bleeding. Driz defeated the attack and slipped away again. He could
I'll be
sense his
right back.
father's presence. He knew that the true Zacnophane lurked just below the surface of this creature, but how could he free that spirit? Clearly, he could not hope to continue this struggle much longer. It is you, Driz whispered. No one else could fight so. Zacnophane is there, and Zacnophane will not kill me. Another thought came to Driz then, a notion he had to believe. Once again, the truth of Drizzt's convictions became the test. Drizzt slipped his scimitars back into their sheaths. The spirit wraith snarled. His swords danced about in the air and cut viciously. But Zacnophane did not come on. Kill him! Malice squealed in glee, thinking her moment of victory at hand. The images of the combat, though, flitted away from her suddenly, and she was left with only darkness. She had given too much back to Zacnophane when Drizzt had stepped up the tempo of the combat. She had been forced to allow more of Zac's consciousness back into her animation, needing all of Zacnophane's fighting skills to defeat her warrior son. Now Malice was left with blackness, and with the weight of impending doom hanging precariously over her head. She glanced back at her too curious daughter, then sank back within her trance, fighting to regain control. Drizzt, Zacnophane said, and the word felt so very good indeed to the animation. Zac's swords went into their sheaths, though his hands had to struggle against the demands of Matron Malice every inch of the way. Drizzt started toward him, wanting nothing more than to hug his father and dearest friend, but Zacnophane put out a hand to keep him back. No, the spirit wraith explained. I do not know how long I can resist. The body is hers, I fear, Zacnophane replied. Drizzt did not understand at first. Then you are. I am dead, Zacnophane stated bluntly. At peace, be assured. Malice has repaired my body for her own vile purposes. But you defeated her, Drizzt said, daring to hope. We are together again. A temporary stay, and no more. As if to accentuate the point, Zacnophane's hand involuntarily shot to his sword hilt. He grimaced and snarled, and stubbornly fought back, gradually loosening his grip on the weapon. She is coming back, my son. That one is always coming back. I cannot bear to lose you again, Drizzt said. When I saw you in the Illithid cavern, it was not me that you saw, Zacnophane tried to explain. It was the zombie of Malice's evil will. I am gone, my son. I have been gone for many years. You are here, Drizzt reasoned. By Malice's will, not my own, Zacnophane growled, and his face contorted as he struggled to push Malice away for just a moment longer. Back in control, Zacnophane studied the warrior that his son had become. You fight well, he remarked. Better than I had ever imagined. That is good. And it is good that you had the courage to run. Zacnophane's face contorted again suddenly, stealing the words. This time, both of his hands went to his swords, and this time, both weapons came flashing out. No, Drizzt pleaded, as a mist welled in his lavender eyes. Fight her! I cannot, the spirit wraith replied. Flee from this place, Drizzt. Flee to the very ends of the world. Malice will never forgive. She will never stop. The spirit wraith leaped forward, and Drizzt had no choice but to draw his weapons. But Zacnophane jerked suddenly before he got within reach of Drizzt. For us, Zac cried in startling clarity, a call that pealed like a trumpet of victory in the green glowing chamber and echoed across the miles to Matron Malice's heart like the final toll of a drum signaling the onset of doom. Zacnophane had wrested control again for just a fleeting instant, one that allowed the charging spirit wraith to veer off the walkway. 25. Consequences. Matron Malice could not even scream her denial. 1,000 explosions pounded her brain when Zacnafane went into the acid lake, 1,000 realizations of impending and unavoidable disaster. She leaped from her stone throne, her slender hands twisting and clenching in the air, as though she were trying to find something tangible to grasp, something that wasn't there. Her breath rasped in labored gasps, and wordless snarls issued from her gulping mouth. After a moment in which she could not calm herself, Malice heard one sound more clearly than the din of her own contortions. Behind her came the slight hiss of the small, wicked snakeheads of a high priestess's whip. Malice spun about, and there stood Breeza, her face grimly and determinedly set, and her whip's 6 living snakeheads waving in the air. "I had hoped that my time of ascension would be many years away," the eldest daughter said calmly. "But you are weak, Malice. Too weak to hold House Do'Urden together in the trials that will follow your failure." Malice wanted to laugh in the face of her daughter's foolishness. Snake-headed whips were personal gifts from the Spider Queen and could not be used against matron mothers. For some reason, though, Malice could not find the courage or conviction to refute her daughter at that moment. She watched, mesmerized, as Breeze's arms slowly reared back and then shot forward. The 6 snakeheads uncoiled toward Malice. It was impossible. It went against all the tenets of Lolth's doctrine. The fanged heads came on eagerly and dived into Malice's flesh with all the Spider Queen's fury behind them. Searing agony coursed through Malice's body, jolting and racking her and leaving an icy numbness in its wake. Malice teetered on the brink of consciousness, trying to hold firmly against her daughter, trying to show Breeza the futility and stupidity of continuing the attack. The snake whip snapped again, and the floor rushed up to swallow Malice. Breeza muttered something Malice heard, some curse or chant to the Spider Queen. Then came a third crack, and Malice knew nothing more. She was dead before the 5th strike, but Breeza pounded on for many minutes, venting her fury to let the Spider Queen be assured that House Do'Urden truly had forsaken its failing matron mother. By the time Dinan, unexpectedly and unannounced, burst into the room, Breeza had settled comfortably into the stone throne. The elder boy glanced over at his mother's battered body, then back to Breeza, his head shaking in disbelief, and a wide, knowing grin splayed across his face. "What have you done, Matron Breeza?" Dinan asked, catching his slip of the tongue before Breeza could react to it. "Zincarla has failed," Breeza growled as she glared at him. "Lolth would no longer accept Malice." Dinan's laughter, which seemed founded in sarcasm, cut to the marrow of Breeza's bones. Her eyes narrowed further, and she let Dinan see her hand clearly as it moved down to the hilt of her whip. "You have chosen the perfect moment for ascension," the elder boy explained calmly, apparently not at all worried that Breeza would punish him. "We are under attack." "Fay Branch?" Breeza cried, springing excitedly from her seat. 5 minutes in the throne as matron mother, and already Breeza faced her first test. She would prove herself to the Spider Queen and redeem House Do'Urden from much of the damage that Malice's failures had caused. "No, sister," Dinan said quickly, without pretense. "Not House Fay Branch." Her brother's cool response put Breeza back in the throne and twisted her grin of excitement into a grimace of pure dread. "They Henry." Dinan, too, no longer smiled. Vierna and Maya looked out from House Do'Urden's balcony to the approaching forces beyond the adamantite gate. The sisters did not know their enemy, as Dinan had, but they understood from the sheer size of the force that some great house was involved. Still, House Do'Urden boasted 250 soldiers, many trained by Zacnafane himself, with 200 more well-trained and well-armed troops on loan from Matron Henry. Both Vierna and Maya figured that their chances were not so bad. They quickly outlined defense strategies, and Maya swung one leg over the balcony railing, meaning to descend to the courtyard and relay the plans to her captains. Of course, when she and Vierna suddenly realized that they had 200 enemies already within their gates, enemies they had accepted on loan from Matron Henry, their plans meant little. Maya still straddled the railing when the first Baenri soldiers came up on the balcony. Vierna drew her whip and cried for Maya to do the same. But Maya was not moving, and Vierna, on closer inspection, noticed several tiny darts protruding from her sister's body. Vierna's own snake-headed whip turned on her then, its fangs slicing across her delicate face. Vierna understood at once that House Do'Urden's downfall had been decreed by Lolth herself. "Sin Carla," Vierna mumbled, realizing the source of the disaster. Blood blurred her vision, and a wave of dizziness overtook her as darkness closed in all about her. "This cannot be," Brisa cried. "House Baenri attacks? Lolth has not given me—" "We had our chance," Dinan yelled at her. "Zaknafein was our chance." Dinan looked to his mother's torn body. "And the Wraith has failed, I would assume." Brisa growled and lashed out with her whip. Dinan expected the strike, though. He knew Brisa so very well, and he darted beyond the weapon's range. Brisa took a step toward him. "Does your anger require more enemies?" Dinan asked, swords in hand. "Go out to the balcony, dear sister, where you will find 1,000 awaiting you." Brisa cried out in frustration, but turned away from Dinan and rushed from the room, hoping to salvage something out of this terrible predicament. Dinan did not follow. He stooped over Matron Malice and looked one final time into the eyes of the tyrant who had ruled his entire life. Malice had been a powerful figure, confident and wicked, but how fragile her rule had proved, broken by the antics of a renegade child. Dinan heard a commotion out in the corridor. Then the anteroom door swung open again. The elder boy did not have to look to know that enemies were in the room. He continued to stare at his dead mother, knowing that he soon would share the same fate. The expected blow did not fall, however, and several agonizing moments later, Dinan dared to glance back over his shoulder. Jarlaxle sat comfortably on the stone throne. "You are not surprised?" the mercenary asked, noting that Dinan's expression did not change. "Breaking the Earth was among the Baenri troops, perhaps all of the Baenri troops," Dinan said casually. He covertly glanced around the room at the dozen or so soldiers who had followed Jarlaxle in. If only he could get to the mercenary leader before they killed him, Dinan thought. Watching the death of the treacherous Jarlaxle might bring some measure of satisfaction to this whole disaster. "Observant," Jarlaxle said to him. "I hold to my suspicions that you knew all along that your house was doomed." "If Sin Carla failed," Dinan replied. "And you knew it would?" the mercenary asked, almost rhetorically. Dinan nodded. 10 years ago, he began, wondering why he was telling all this to Jarlaxle. "I watched as Zaknafein was sacrificed to the Spider Queen. Rarely has any house in all of Menzo Baranzon seen a greater waste." "The weapon master of House Do'Urden had a mighty reputation," the mercenary put in. "Well earned, do not doubt," replied Dinan. "Then Drizzt, my brother, another mighty warrior." Again Dinan nodded. "Drizzt deserted us. With war at our gates, Matron Malice's miscalculation could not be ignored. I knew then that House Do'Urden was doomed." "Your house defeated House Hannet, no small feat," reasoned Jarlaxle. "Only with the help of Breaking the Earth," Dinan corrected. "For most of my life, I have watched House Do'Urden, under Matron Malice's steady guidance, ascend through the city hierarchy. Every year our power and influence grew. For the last decade, though, I have seen us spiral down. I have watched the foundations of House Do'Urden crumble. The structure had to follow the descent." "As wise as you are skilled with the blade," the mercenary remarked. "I have said that before of Dinan Do'Urden, and it seems that I am proved correct once again." "If I have pleased you, I ask one favor," Dinan said, rising to his feet. "Grant it if you will." "Kill you quickly and without pain?" Jarlaxle asked, through a widening smile. Dinan nodded for the third time. "No," Jarlaxle said simply. Not understanding, Dinan brought his sword flashing up and ready. "I'll not kill you at all," Jarlaxle explained. Dinan kept his sword up high and studied the mercenary's face, looking for some hint as to his intent. "I am a noble of the house," Dinan said, "a witness to the attack, No house elimination is complete if nobles remain alive. A witness? Jarlaxle laughed. Against House Baenri? To what gain? Dinan's sword dropped low. And what is my fate? He asked. Will Matron Baenri take me in? Dinan's tone showed that he was not excited about that possibility. Matron Baenri has little use for males, Jarlaxle replied. If any of your sisters survive, and I believe the one named Vierna has, they may find themselves in Matron Baenri's chapel. For the withered old mother of House Baenri would never see the value of a male such as Dinan, I fear. And what? Dinan demanded. I know your value, Jarlaxle stated casually. He led Dinan's gaze around to the concurring grins of his troops. Brigandierth? Dinan balked. Me, a noble, to become a rogue? Quicker than Dinan's eye could follow, Jarlaxle whipped the dagger into the body at his feet. The blade buried itself up to the hilt in Malice's back. A rogue, or a corpse, Jarlaxle casually explained. It was not so difficult a choice. A few days later, Jarlaxle and Dinan looked back on the ruined adamantite gate of House Do'Urden. Once it had stood so proud and strong, with its intricate carvings of spiders and the two formidable stalagmite pillars that served as guard towers. How fast it changed, Dinan remarked. I see all my former life before me, yet it is all gone. Forget what has gone before, Jarlaxle suggested. The mercenary's sly wink told Dinan that he had something specific in mind as he completed the thought. Accept that which may aid in your future. Dinan did a quick visual inspection of himself and the ruins. My battle gear? He asked, fishing for Jarlaxle's intent. My training. Your brother. Drizzt. Again, the cursed name reared up to bring anguish to Dinan. It would seem that there is still the matter of Drizzt Do'Urden to be reconciled, Jarlaxle explained. He's a high prize in the eyes of the Spider Queen. Drizzt? Dinan asked again, hardly believing Jarlaxle's words. Why are you so surprised? Jarlaxle asked. Your brother is still alive, else why was Matron Malice brought down? What house could be interested in him? Dinan asked bluntly. Another mission for Matron Baenri? Jarlaxle's laugh belittled him. Brigandierth may act without the guidance or the purse of a recognized house, he replied. You plan to go after my brother? It may be the perfect opportunity for Dinan to show his value to my little family, said Jarlaxle to no one in particular. Who better to catch the renegade that brought down House Do'Urden? Your brother's value increased many times over with the failure of Zincarla. I have seen what Drizzt has become, said Dinan. The cost will be great. My resources are limitless, Jarlaxle answered smugly. And no cost is too high if the gain is higher. The eccentric mercenary went silent for a short while, allowing Dinan's gaze to linger over the ruins of his once proud house. No, Dinan said suddenly. Jarlaxle turned a wary eye on him. I'll not go after Drizzt, Dinan explained. You serve Jarlaxle, the master of Brigandierth, the mercenary calmly reminded him. As I once served Malice, the matron of House Do'Urden, Dinan replied with equal calm. I would not venture out again after Drizzt for my mother. He looked at Jarlaxle squarely, unafraid of the consequences. And I shall not do it again for you. Jarlaxle spent a long moment studying his companion. Normally, the mercenary leader would not tolerate such brazen insubordination, but Dinan was sincere and adamant, beyond doubt. Jarlaxle had accepted Dinan into Brigandierth because he valued the Elderbor's experience and skill. He could not now readily dismiss Dinan's judgment. I could have you put to a slow death, Jarlaxle replied, more to see Dinan's reaction than to make any promises. He had no intention of destroying one as valuable as Dinan. No worse than the death and disgrace I would find at Drizzt's hands, Dinan answered calmly. Another long moment passed as Jarlaxle considered the implication of Daemon's words. Perhaps Break in the Air should rethink its plans for hunting the renegade. Perhaps the price would prove too high. "Come, my soldier," Jarlaxle said at length. "Let us return to our home, to the streets, where we might learn what adventures our futures hold." 26. Lights in the ceiling. Belwar ran along the walkways to get to his friend. Drizzt did not watch the Zwerfneblin's approach. He kneeled on a narrow bridge, looking down to the bubbling spot in the green lake where Zaknafein had fallen. The acid sputtered and rolled. The scorched hilt of a sword came up into view, then disappeared under the opaque veil of green. "He was there all along," Drizzt whispered to Belwar. "My father." "A mighty chance you took, Dark Elf," the Burrow Warden replied. "Maga Camera. When you put your blades away, I thought he would surely strike you down." "He was there all along," Drizzt said again. He looked up at his Zwerfneblin friend. "You showed me that." Belwar screwed up his face in confusion. "The spirit cannot be separated from the body," Drizzt tried to explain. "Not in life." He looked back to the ripples in the acid lake. "And not in undeath. In my years alone in the wilds, I had lost myself, so I believed. But you showed me the truth. The heart of Drizzt was never gone from his body. And so I knew it to be true as Zaknafein." "Other forces were involved this time," remarked Belwar. "I would not have been so certain." "You did not know Zaknafein," Drizzt retorted. He rose to his feet, the moisture ringing his lavender eyes, diminished by the sincere smile that widened across his face. "I did. Spirit, not muscles, guides a warrior's blade. And only he who was truly Zaknafein could move with such grace. A moment of crisis gave Zaknafein the strength to resist my mother's will." "And you gave him the moment of crisis," reasoned Belwar. "Defeat Matron Malice or kill his own son." Belwar shook his bald head and crinkled up his nose. "Maga Camera, but you are brave, Dark Elf." He shot Drizzt a wink. "Or stupid." "Neither," replied Drizzt. "I only trusted in Zaknafein." He looked back to the acid lake and said no more. Belwar fell silent and waited patiently while Drizzt finished his private eulogy. When Drizzt finally looked away from the lake, Belwar motioned for the drow to follow and started off along the walkway. "Come," the Burrow Warden said over his shoulder. "Witness the truth of our slain friend." Drizzt thought the Petch a beautiful thing, a beauty inspired by the peaceful smile that at last had found its way onto his tormented friend's face. He and Belwar said a few words, mumbled a few hopes to whatever gods might be listening, and gave Clacker to the acid lake, thinking it a preferable thing to the bellies of the carrion eaters that roamed the underdark corridors. Drizzt and Belwar set off again alone, as they had been when they first departed the Zwerfneblin city, and arrived in Blingdenstone a few days later. The guards at the city's mammoth gates, though obviously thrilled, seemed confused at their return. They allowed the two companions entrance on the Burrow Warden's promise that he would go straight off and inform King Schnickdick. "This time he will let you stay, Dark Elf," Belwar said to Drizzt. "You beat the monster." He left Drizzt at his house, vowing that he would return soon with welcome news. Drizzt wasn't so sure of any of it. Zaknafein's final warning that Matron Malice would never give up her hunt remained clearly in his thoughts, and he could not deny the truth. Much had happened in the 10 days that he and Belwar had been out of Blingdenstone, but none of it, as far as Drizzt knew, diminished the very real threat to the Zwerfneblin city. Drizzt had only agreed to follow Belwar back to Blingdenstone because it seemed a proper first step to the plan he had decided upon. "How long shall we battle, Matron Malice?" Drizzt asked the blank stone when the Burrow Warden had gone. He needed to hear his reasoning spoken aloud to convince himself beyond doubt that his decision had been a wise one. Neither gains in the conflict, but that is the way of the Drow, is it not? Drizzt fell back onto one of the stools beside the little table and considered the truth of his words. "You will hunt me, to your ruin or to mine, blinded by the hatred that rules your life. There can be no forgiveness in Menzoberranzan. That would go against the edict of your foul Spider Queen. And this is the Underdark, your world of shadows and gloom. But it is not all the world, Matron Malice, and I shall see how long your evil arms can reach." Drizzt sat silent for many minutes, remembering his first lessons at the Drow Academy. He tried to find some clue that would lead him to believe that the stories of the surface world were no more than lies. The Master's deceptions at the Drow Academy had been perfected over centuries and were infallibly complete. Drizzt soon came to realize that he simply would have to trust his feelings. When Belwar returned, grim-faced, a few hours later, Drizzt's resolve was firm. "Stubborn, orc-brained," the Burrow Warden gnashed through his teeth as he crossed through the stone door. Drizzt stopped him with a heartfelt laugh. "They will not hear of your staying," Belwar yelled at him, trying to steal his mirth. "Did you truly expect otherwise?" Drizzt asked him. "My fight is not over, dear Belwar. Do you believe that my family could be so easily defeated?" "We will go back out," Belwar growled, moving over to take the stool near Drizzt. "My generous," the word dripped of sarcasm, "king agreed that you could remain in the city for a single 10-day. When I leave alone," Drizzt interrupted. He pulled the onyx figurine out of his pouch and reconsidered his words. "Almost alone." "We had this argument before, Dark Elf," Belwar reminded him. "That was different." "Was it?" retorted the Burrow Warden. "Will you survive any better alone in the wilds of the Underdark now than you did before? Have you forgotten the burdens of loneliness?" "I'll not be in the Underdark," Drizzt replied. "Back to your homeland you mean to go?" Belwar cried, leaping to his feet and sending his stool skidding across the stone. "No, never," Drizzt laughed. "Never will I return to Menzoberranzan, unless it is at the end of Matron Malice's chains." The Burrow Warden retrieved his seat and eased back into it, curious. "Neither will I remain in the Underdark," Drizzt explained. "This is Malice's world, more fitting to the dark heart of a true drow." Belwar began to understand, but he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "What are you saying?" he demanded. "Where do you mean to go?" "The surface," Drizzt replied evenly. Belwar leaped up again, sending his stone stool bouncing even farther across the floor. "I was up there once," Drizzt continued, undaunted by the reaction. He calmed the Zwerfneplin with a determined gaze. "I partook of a drow massacre. Only the actions of my companions bring pain to my memories of that journey. The sense of the wide world and the cool feel of the wind bring no dread to my heart." "The surface," Belwar muttered, his head lowered and his voice almost a groan. "Maga Camera. Never did I plan to travel there. It is not the place of a Zwerfneplin." Belwar pounded the table suddenly and looked up, a determined smile on his face. "But if Drizzt will go, then Belwar will go by his side." "Drizzt will go alone," the drow replied. "As you just said, the surface is not the place of a Zwerfneplin." "Nor a drow," the deep gnome added pointedly. "I do not fit the usual expectations of drow," Drizzt retorted. "My heart is not their heart, and their home is not mine. How far must I walk through the endless tunnels to be free of my family's hatred? And if, In fleeing Menzoberranzan, I chance upon another of the great dark elf cities, Jednasad or some similar place. Will those drought too take up the hunt to fulfill the Spider Queen's desires that I be slain? No, Belwar. I will find no peace in the close ceilings of this world. You, I fear, would never be content removed from the stone of the Underdark. Your place is here, a place of deserved honor among your people. Belwar sat quietly for a long time, digesting all that Drizzt had said. He would follow Drizzt willingly, if Drizzt desired it so. But he truly did not wish to leave the Underdark. Belwar could raise no argument against Drizzt's desires to go. The Dark Elf would find many trials up on the surface, Belwar knew. But would they outweigh the pains Drizzt would ever experience in the Underdark? Belwar reached into a deep pocket and took out the light-giving brooch. "Take this, Dark Elf," he said softly, flipping it to Drizzt. "And do not forget me." "Never for a single day, in all the centuries of my future," Drizzt promised. "Never once." The 10-day passed all too quickly for Belwar, who was reluctant to see his friend go. The Burrow Warden knew that he would never look upon Drizzt again, but he knew also that Drizzt's decision was a sound one. As a friend, Belwar took it upon himself to see that Drizzt had the best chance of success. He took the drow to the finest provisioners in all of Blingdenstone and paid for the supplies out of his own pocket. Belwar then procured an even greater gift for Drizzt. Deep gnomes had traveled to the surface on occasion, and King Schnicktick possessed several copies of rough maps leading out of the Underdark tunnels. "The journey will take you many 10 days, Belwar said to Drizzt when he handed him the rolled parchment. "But I fear that never would you find your way at all without this." Drizzt's hands trembled as he unrolled the map. It was true, he now dared to believe. He was indeed going to the surface. He wanted to tell Belwar at that moment to come along. How could he say goodbye to so dear a friend? But principles had carried Drizzt this far in his travels, and principles demanded that he not be selfish now. He walked out of Blingdenstone the next day, promising Belwar that if he ever came this way again, he would return to visit. Both of them knew he would never return. Miles and days passed uneventfully. Sometimes Drizzt held the magical brooch Belwar had given to him high. Sometimes he walked in the quiet darkness. Whether coincidence or kind fate, he met no monsters along the course laid out on the rough map. Few things had changed in the Underdark, and though the parchment was old, even ancient, the trail was easily followed. Shortly after breaking camp on his 33rd day out of Blingdenstone, Drizzt felt a lightening of the air, a sensation of that cold and vast wind he so vividly remembered. He pulled the onyx figurine from his pouch and summoned Guinevere to his side. Together they walked on, anxiously, expecting the ceiling to disappear around every bend. They came into a small cave, and the darkness beyond the distant archway was not nearly as gloomy as the darkness behind them. Drizzt held his breath and led Guinevere out. Stars twinkled through the broken clouds of the night sky. The moon's silvery light played out in a duller glow behind one large cloud, and the wind howled a mountain song. Drizzt was high up in the realms, perched on the side of a tall mountain in the midst of a mighty range. He minded not at all the bite of the breeze, but stood very still for a long time and watched the meandering clouds pass him on their slow aerial trek to the moon. Guinevere stood beside him, unjudging, and Drizzt knew the panther always would.
This book is over, but the story continues. Keep listening after the credits to hear the beginning of Sojourn, Dark Elf Trilogy, Book 3. Book 3 in the Legend of Drizzt series free.
Here's the next title in this series.
This is Audible.
Audible Frontiers presents Soldier.
And Zareen, of course.
Yeah,
Loyal appeared to be wondering what it was he was looking for, too. He scratched a tufted ear, peered one way down the street, then the other, then scratched the other ear. Then he stared up at the roof of the inn. Lan appeared from the alleyway beside the inn and moved out into the street, eyes studying the darker shadows along the buildings. Maybe he missed seeing something, Baron muttered, though he found it hard to believe, and turned toward the alley. I am supposed to be looking, so I'll look. Maybe he did miss something. Lan had stopped a little way down the street, staring at the paving stones in front of his feet. The warder started back toward the inn, walking quickly, but peering at the street ahead of him as if following something. Whatever it was led straight to one of the mounting blocks, almost beside the inn door. He stopped there, staring at the top of the gray stone block. Perrin decided to abandon going down the alley. It stank as much as the canals in this part of Ilion, for one thing, and walked over to Lan instead. He saw what the warder was staring at right away. Pressed into the top of the stone mounting block were two prints, as if a huge hound had rested its forepaws there. The smell that was almost burned sulfur was strongest here. Dogs don't make footprints in stone. Right, they don't. He could make out the trail Lan had followed, too. The hound had trotted up the street as far as the mounting block, then turned and gone back the way it had come, leaving tracks in the stone as if they had been a plowed field. They just don't. Darkhound, Lan said, and Zareen gasped. Loyal moaned softly, for no gear. A darkhound leaves no mark on dirt, blacksmith, not even on mud. But stone is another matter. There hasn't been a darkhound seen south of the Mountains of Doom since the Trolloc Wars. This one was hunting for something, I'd say. And now that it has found it, it is going to tell its master. Me? Perrin thought. Gray men and darkhounds hunting me? This is crazy. Are you telling me Nita was right? Zareen demanded in a shaky voice. Old Grim is really riding with the Wild Hunt? Light, I always thought it was just a story. Don't be a complete fool, girl, Lan said harshly. If the Dark One were free, we'd all be worse than dead by now. He peered off down the street, the way the tracks went. But darkhounds are real enough, almost as dangerous as Murdro, and harder to kill. Now you bring fetches into it, Zareen muttered. Gray men, fetches, darkhounds. You had better lead me to the Horn of Valir, farm boy. What other surprises do you have waiting for me? No questions, Lan told her. You still know little enough that Moraine will release you from your oath if you swear not to follow. I'll take that oath myself, and you can go now. You would be wise to give it. You will not frighten me away, Stoneface, Zareen said. I do not frighten easily. But she sounded frightened, and she smelled it too. I have a question, Perrin said, and I want an answer. You didn't sense this Darkhound, Lan, and neither did Moraine. Why not? The warder was silent for a time. "The answer to that, blacksmith," he said grimly at last. "Maybe more than you or I, either one, want to know. I hope the answer does not kill us all. You three get what sleep you can. I doubt we will stay the night in Ilion, and I fear we have hard riding ahead." "What are you going to do?" Perrin asked. "I'm going after Moraine, to tell her about the Darkhound. She can't be angry with me for following for that, not when she would not know it was there until it took her throat." The first big drops of rain splattered on the paving stones as they went back inside. Billy had removed the last of the dead graymen and was sweeping up the sawdust where they had bled. The dark-eyed girl was singing a sad song about a boy leaving his love. Mistress Luhan would have enjoyed it greatly. Lan ran ahead of them, across the common room and up the stairs. By the time Perrin reached the second floor, the warder was already starting back down, buckling his sword belt on, color-shifting cloak hanging over his arm, as if he hardly cared who saw it.
"If he is wearing that in the city,"
Loyal's shaggy hair almost brushed the ceiling as he shook his head.
"I do not know if I can sleep, but I will try. Dreams will be more pleasant than staying awake."
"Not always, Loyal," Perrin thought as the Ogier went on down the hall. Zareen seemed to want to stay with him, but he told her to go to sleep and firmly shut the slatted door in her face. He stared at his own bed reluctantly as he stripped down to his underbreeches. "I have to find out," he sighed, and crawled onto the bed. Rain drummed down outside and thunder boomed. The breeze across his bed carried some of the rain's coolness, but he did not think he would need any of the blankets at the foot of the mattress. His last thought before sleep claimed him was that he had forgotten to light a candle again, though the room was dark. Careless. Mustn't be careless. Carelessness ruins the work. Dreams tumbled through his head. Darkhounds chasing him. He never saw them, but he could hear their howling. Fades and graymen. A tall, slender man flashed into them again and again, in richly embroidered coat and boots with gold fringe. Most of the time he held what seemed to be a sword shining like the sun, laughed triumphantly. Sometimes the man sat on a throne, and kings and queens groveled before him. These felt strange, as if they were not really his dreams at all. Then the dreams changed, and he knew he was in the wolf dream he sought. This time he had hoped for it. He stood atop a high, flat-topped stone spire, the wind ruffling his hair, bringing 1,000 dry scents and a faint hint of water hidden in the far distance. For an instant he thought he had the form of a wolf, and fumbled at his own body to make sure what he saw was really him. He wore his own coat and breeches and boots. He held his bow, and his quiver hung at his side. The axe was not there. "Hopper! Hopper, where are you?" The wolf did not come. Rugged mountains surrounded him, and other tall spires, separated by arid flats and jumbled ridges, and sometimes a large plateau rising with sheer sides. Things grew, but nothing lush. Tough, short grass. Bushes wiry and covered with thorn, and other things that even seemed to have thorns on their fat leaves. Scattered, stunted trees twisted by the wind. Yet wolves could find hunting even in this land. As he peered at this rough land, a circle of darkness suddenly blanked out a part of the mountains. He could not have said whether the darkness was right in front of his face or halfway to the mountains, but he seemed to be seeing through it and beyond. Matt rattling a dice cup. His opponent stared at Matt with eyes of fire. Matt did not seem to see the man, but Perrin knew him. "Matt!" he shouted. "It's Baalzaman! Light, Matt, you're dicing with Baalzaman!" Matt made his toss, and as the dice spun, the vision faded and the dark place was dry mountains again. "Hopper!" Perrin turned slowly, looking in every direction. He even looked up in the sky. He can fly now. Where clouds promised to rain, the ground far below the spire top would drink up as soon as it fell. "Hopper!" A darkness formed among the clouds, a hole into somewhere else. Egwene and Nynaeve and Elaine stood looking at a huge metal cage with a raised door held on a heavy spring. They stepped in and reached up together to loose the catch. The barred door snapped down behind them. A woman with her hair all in braids laughed at them, and another woman, all in white, laughed at her. The hole in the sky closed, and there were only clouds. "Hopper, where are you?" he called. "I need you, Hopper!" And the grizzled wolf was there, alighting on the spire top as if he had leaped from somewhere higher. "Dangerous. You have been warned, young bull. Too young. Too new yet. I need to know, Hopper. You said there were things I must see. I need to see more. Know more." He hesitated, thinking of Matt, of Egwene, and Nynaeve and Elaine. "The strange things I see here, are they real?" Hopper's sending seemed slow, as if it were so simple the wolf could not understand the need to explain it or how to. Finally, though, something came. What is real is not real. What is not real is real. Flesh is a dream, and dreams have flesh. That doesn't tell me anything, Hopper. I do not understand. The wolf looked at him as if he had said he did not understand that water was wet. You said I had to see something, and you showed me Baalzamon and Lanfear. Heartbang, Moon Hunter. Why did you show me, Hopper? Why did I have to see them? The last hunt comes. Sadness filled the sending and a sense of inevitability. What will be, must be. I do not understand. The last hunt? What last hunt? Hopper, gray men came to kill me tonight. The not dead hunt you? Yes, gray men. After me. A darkhound was right outside the inn. I want to know why they're after me. Shadow Brothers. Hopper crouched, looking to either side as if he almost expected an attack. Long since we have seen the Shadow Brothers. You must go, young bull. Great danger. Flee the Shadow Brothers. Why are they after me, Hopper? You do know. I know you do. Flee, young bull. Hopper leaped, forepaws hitting Perrin's chest, knocking him back over the edge. Leave the Shadow Brothers. The wind rushed in his ears as he fell. Hopper and the edge of the spire top dwindled above him. Why, Hopper? He shouted. I have to know why. The last hunt comes. He was going to hit. He knew it. The ground below rushed up at him, and he tensed against the crushing impact that... He started awake, staring at the candle flickering on the small table beside the bed. Lightning flashes lit the window, and thunder rattled it. What did he mean, the last hunt? He mumbled. I did not light any candle. You talk to yourself and thrash in your sleep. He jumped and cursed himself for not having noticed the herbal scent in the air. Zareen sat on a stool at the edge of the candlelight, elbow on her knee, chin on her fist, watching him. You are Taviran, she said, as if ticking off a point. Stoneface thinks those odd eyes of yours can see things his can't. Gray men want to kill you. You travel with an Aes Sedai, a warder, and an Ogier. You free caged Aiel and kill white cloaks. Who are you, farm boy? The dragon reborn? Her voice said that was the most ridiculous thing she could think of, but he still stiffened uneasily. Whoever you are, big man, she added, you could do with a little more hair on your chest. He twisted around, cursing, and scrabbled one of the blankets over him to his neck. She keeps making me jump like a frog on a hot rock. Zareen's face was at the edge of shadows. He could not see her clearly except when lightning shone through the window, the harsh illumination casting its own shadows across her strong nose and high cheekbones. Suddenly, he remembered Min saying he should run from a beautiful woman. Once he had recognized Lanfear in that wolf dream, he had thought Min must mean her. He did not think it was possible for a woman to be any more beautiful than Lanfear. But she was just in a dream. Zareen was sitting there staring at him with those dark, tilted eyes, considering, weighing. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "What do you want? Who are you?" She threw back her head and laughed. "I am Fail, farm boy, a hunter of the horn. Who do you think I am, the woman of your dreams? Why did you jump that way? You would think I had goosed you." Before he could find words, the door crashed back against the wall, and Moraine stood in the doorway, her face as pale and grim as death. "Your wolf dreams tell as truly as a dreamer's, Perrin. The Forsaken are loose, and one of them rules in Ilion." Chapter 44. Hunted. Perrin climbed off the bed and started dressing, not caring whether Zareen was watching or not. He knew what he intended to do, but he asked Moraine anyway. "Do we leave?" "Unless you want to make closer acquaintance with Samael," she said dryly. Thunder crashed overhead as if to punctuate her sentence, and lightning flashed. The Aes Sedai barely glanced at Zareen. Stuffing his shirt tail into his breeches, he suddenly wished he had his coat and cloak on. Naming which one of the Forsaken it was made the room seem cold. Balsamon isn't bad enough. We have to have the Forsaken loose, too. Light. Does it even matter if we find Rand now? Is it too late? But he kept dressing, stamping his feet into his boots. It was that or give up, and Two Rivers folk were not known for giving up. "Samael?" Zareen said faintly. "One of the Forsaken rules light." "Do you still wish to follow?" Moraine said softly. "I would not make you stay here, not now. But I will give you one last chance to swear to go another way than I." Zareen hesitated, and Perrin paused with his coat half on. Surely no one would choose to go with people who incurred the wrath of one of the Forsaken. Not now that she knew something of what they faced. Not unless she has a very good reason. For that matter, anyone who heard one of the Forsaken was loose should already be running for a sea folk ship and asking passage to the other side of the Aiel Waste, not sitting there thinking. "No," Zareen said finally, and he began to relax. "No, I will not swear to go another way, whether you lead me to the Horn of Valir or not. Not even whoever does find the horn will have a story such as this. I think this story will be told for the ages, Aes Sedai, and I will be part of it." "No," Perrin snapped. "That is not good enough. What do you want?" "I have no time for this bickering," Moraine broke in. "Any moment, Lord Brand may learn that one of his Darkhounds is dead. You can be sure he will know that means a warder, and he will come looking for the Guidine's Aes Sedai. Do you mean to sit here until he discovers where you are? Move, you foolish children! Move!" She vanished down the hall before he could open his mouth. Zareen did not wait either, running from the room without her candle. Perrin hastily gathered his things and dashed for the back stairs, still buckling his axe belt around his waist. He caught up to Loyal going down, the Ogier trying to stuff a wood-bound book into his saddlebags and put on his cloak at the same time. Perrin gave him a hand with the cloak while they both ran down the stairs, and Zareen caught the pair of them before they could dash out into the pouring rain. Perrin hunched his shoulders against the wet and ran for the stable across the storm-darkened yard without waiting to pull up the hood of his cloak. She has to have a reason. Being in a bloody story isn't reason enough for any but a mad woman. The rain soaked his shaggy curls, laying them flat around his head, before he darted through the stable door. Moraine was there before them, in an oiled cloak, still beaded with rain, and Nita holding a lantern for Lan to finish saddling the horses. There was an extra, a big gelding with an even stronger nose than Zareen's. "I will send pigeons every day," the stout woman was saying. "No one will suspect me. Fortune pricked me. Even white cloaks do speak well of me." "Listen to me, woman," Moraine snapped. "This is not a white cloak or a dark friend I speak of. You will flee this city and make anyone you care for flee with you. For a dozen years you have obeyed me. Obey me now." Nita nodded, but reluctantly, and Moraine growled with exasperation. "The bay is yours, girl. Lan said to Zareen. Get on his back. If you do not know how to ride, you must learn by doing or take my offer. Putting one hand on the high pommel, she vaulted easily into the saddle. I was on a horse once, Stoneface, now that I think of it. She twisted around to tie her bundle behind her. What did you mean, Moraine? Perrin demanded as he tossed his saddlebag across Stepper's back. You said he would find out where I am. He knows. The Grey Men. Nita giggled, and he wondered irritably how much she really knew or believed among the things she said she did not believe in. Samael did not send the Grey Men. Moraine mounted Aldib with a cool, straight-backed precision, almost as if there were no hurry. The Darkhound was his, however. I believe it followed my trail. He would not have sent both. Someone wants you, but I do not think Samael even knows you exist. Yet. Perrin stopped with one foot in the stirrup, staring at her, but she seemed more concerned with patting her mare's arching neck than with the questions on his face. As well I went after you, Lan said, and the Aes Sedai sniffed loudly. I could wish you were a woman, Guidine. I would send you to the tower as a novice to learn to obey. He raised an eyebrow and touched the hilt of his sword, then swung into his saddle, and she sighed. Perhaps it is as well you are disobedient. Sometimes it is well. Besides, I do not think Shiriam and Swan Sanche together could teach you obedience. I do not understand, Perrin said. I seem to be saying that a great deal, and I'm tired of it. I want some answers I can understand. He pulled himself the rest of the way up, so Moraine would not be looking down at him. She had enough advantage without that. If he did not send the Grey Men, who did? If a Myrddraal or another Forsaken... He stopped to swallow. Another Forsaken? Light. If somebody else sent them, why did they not tell him? They're all dark friends, aren't they? And why me, Moraine? Why me? Rand is the bloody dragon reborn. He heard the gasps from Zareen and Nita, and only then realized what he had said. Moraine's stare seemed to skin him like the sharpest steel. Hasty bloody tongue. When did I stop thinking before I speak? It seemed to him it had happened when he first felt Zareen's eyes watching him. She was watching him now with her mouth hanging open. You are sealed to us now, Moraine told the bold-faced woman. There is no turning back for you. Ever. Zareen looked as if she wanted to say something and was afraid to, but the Aes Sedai had already turned her attention elsewhere. Nida, flee Ilion tonight, in this hour, and hold your tongue even better than you have held it all these years. There are those who would cut it out for what you could say, before I could even find you. Her hard tone left doubts as to exactly how she meant that, and Nida nodded vigorously, as if she had heard it both ways. As for you, Perrin. The white mare moved closer, and he leaned back from the Aes Sedai despite all he could do. There are many threads woven in the pattern, and some are as black as the shadow itself. Take care one of them does not strangle you. Her heels touched Aldib's flanks, and the mare darted into the rain, Mondab following close behind. Burn you, Moraine, Perrin thought as he rode after them. Sometimes I do not know which side you are on. He glanced at Zareen, riding beside him as if she had been born in a saddle. Whose side are you on? Rain kept people off the streets and canals, so no visible eyes watched them go. But it made the footing uncertain for the horses on the uneven paving stones. By the time they reached the Moredo Causeway, a wide road of packed dirt stretching north through the marsh, the downpour had begun to slacken. Thunder still boomed, but the lightning flashed far behind them, perhaps out to sea. Perrin felt a bit of luck was coming their way. The rain had stayed long enough to hide their departure, but now it seemed they would have a clear night for riding. He said as much, but Lan shook his head. Darkhounds like clear moonlit night best, Blacksmith. Rain the least. A good thunderstorm can keep them away completely. As if his words had bidden it, the rain faded to a faint drizzle. Perrin heard Loyal groan behind him. Causeway and marsh ended together, some 2 miles or so from the city, but the road kept on, slowly bearing a little eastward. Cloud-dark evening faded into night, and the misting rain continued. Moraine and Lan kept a steady, ground-eating pace. The horses' hooves splashed through puddles in the hard-packed dirt. The moon shone through gaps in the clouds. Low hills began to rise around them, and trees to appear more and more often. Perrin thought there must be forest ahead, but he was not sure how he liked the idea. Woods could hide them from pursuit. Woods could let the pursuit come close before they saw. A thin howl rose far behind them. For a moment he thought it was a wolf. He surprised himself by nearly reaching out to the wolf before he could stop. The cry came again, and he knew it was no wolf. Others answered it, all miles behind. Eerie wails holding blood and death, cries that spoke of nightmares. To his surprise, Lan and Moraine slowed, the Aes Sedai studying the hills around them in the night. "They are a long way," he said. "They'll not catch us if we keep on." "The Darkhounds?" Serene muttered. "Those are the Darkhounds? Are you sure it isn't the Wild Hunt Aes Sedai?" "But it is," Moraine replied. "It is." "You can never outrun the Darkhounds, Blacksmith," Lan said. "Not on the fastest horse. Always you must face them and defeat them, or they will pull you down."
I could have stayed in the steading, you know,
Loyal said.
my mother would have had me married by now, but it would not have been a bad life. Plenty of books. I did not have to come outside.
"There," Moraine said, pointing to a tall, treeless mound well off to their right. There were no trees that Perrin could see for 200 paces or more around it either, and they were still sparse beyond that. "We must see them coming to have a chance." The Darkhound's dire cries rose again, closer yet still far. Lan quickened Mondarb's pace a little, now that Moraine had chosen their ground. As they climbed, the horses' hooves clattered on rocks half buried in the dirt and slicked by the drizzle. To Perrin's eyes, most of them had too many squared corners to be natural. At the top, they dismounted around what seemed to be a low, rounded boulder. The moon appeared through a gap in the clouds, and he found himself looking at a weathered stone face 2 paces long. A woman's face, he thought from the length of the hair. The rain made her seem to be weeping. Moraine dismounted and stood looking off in the direction of the howls. She was a shadowed, hooded shape, rain-catching moonlight as it rolled down her oiled cloak. Loyal led his horse over to peer at the carving, then bent closer and felt the features.
I think she was an Ogier,
He said at last.
but this is not an old steading. I would feel it. We all would. And we would be safe from shadow spawn.
"What are you two staring at?" Zareen squinted at the rock. "What is it? Her? Who?" "Many nations have risen and fallen since the breaking," Moraine said without turning. "Some leaving no more than names on a yellowed page or lines on a tattered map. Will we leave as much behind?" The blood-drenched howls rose again, still closer. Perrin tried to calculate their pace and thought Lan had been right. The horses could not have outrun them after all. They would not have long to wait. "Ogier," Lan said. "You and the girl hold the horses." Zareen protested, but he rode straight over to her. "Your knives will not do much good here." His sword blade gleamed in the moonlight as he drew it. "Even this is a last resort. It sounds like 10 out there, not 1. Your work is to keep the horses from running when they smell the Darkhounds. Even Mondar does not like that smell." If the warder's sword was no good, then neither was the axe. Perrin felt something near to relief at that, even if they were shadow spawn. He would not have to use the axe. He drew the length of his unstrung bow from under Stepper's saddle girths. "Maybe this will do some good." "Try if you wish, Blacksmith," Lan said. "They do not die easily. Perhaps you will kill one." Perrin drew a fresh bowstring from his pouch, trying to shield it from the soft rain. The beeswax coating was thin and not much protection against prolonged damp. Setting the bow slantwise between his legs, he bent it easily, fixing the loops of the bowstring into the horn nocks at the ends of the bow. When he straightened, he could see the Darkhounds. They ran like horses at a gallop, and as he caught sight of them, they gathered speed. They were only 10 large shapes running in the night, sweeping through the scattered trees, yet he pulled a broadhead arrow from his quiver, nocked it, but did not draw. He had been far from the best bowman in Emmons Field, but among the younger men, only Rand had been better. At 300 paces, he would shoot, he decided. Fool. You'd have a hard time hitting a target standing still at that distance. But if I wait, the way they are moving... Stepping up beside Moraine, he raised his bow. I just have to imagine that moving shadow is a big dog. Drew the goose feather fletchings to his ear and loosed. He was sure the shaft merged with the nearest shadow, but the only result was a snarl. It is not going to work. They're coming too fast. He was already drawing another arrow. Why aren't you doing something, Moraine? He could see their eyes, shining like silver, their teeth gleaming like burnished steel. Black as the night itself and as big as small ponies, they sped toward him, silent now, seeking the kill. The wind carried a stink near to burned sulfur. The horses whickered fearfully, even Land's warhorse. Burn you, Aes Sedai, do something. He loosed again. The frontmost darkhound faltered and came on. They can die. He shot once more, and the lead darkhound tumbled, staggered to its feet, then fell. Yet even as it did, he knew a moment of despair. One down, and the other 9 had covered 2/3 of the distance already. They seemed to be running even faster, like shadows flowing across the ground. One more arrow. Time for one more, maybe. And then it's the axe. Burn you, Aes Sedai. He drew again. Now, Moraine said as his arrow left the bow. The air between her hands caught fire and streaked toward the darkhounds, vanquishing night. The horses squealed and leaped against being held. Perrin threw an arm across his eyes to shield them from a white-hot glare, like burning, heat like a forge cracking open. Sudden noon flared in the darkness and was gone. When he uncovered his eyes, spots flickered across his vision and the faint, fading image of that line of fire. Where the darkhounds had been was nothing but night-covered ground and the soft rain. The only shadows that moved were cast by clouds crossing the moon. I thought she'd throw fire at them or call lightning, but this... What was that? He asked hoarsely. Moraine was peering off toward Ilion again, as if she could see through all those miles of darkness. Perhaps he did not see, she said, almost to herself. It is far, and if he was not watching, perhaps he did not notice. Who? Zareen demanded. Samael? Her voice shook a little. You said he was in Ilion. How could he see anything here? What did you do? Something forbidden, Moraine said coolly. Forbidden by vows almost as strong as the 3 oaths. She took Aldib's reins from the girl and patted the mare's neck, calming her. Something not used in nearly 2,000 years. Something I might be stilled just for knowing.
Perhaps,
Loyal's voice was a faint boom.
Perhaps we should be going. There could be more.
I think not, the Aes Sedai said, mounting. He would not loose 2 packs at once, even if he has to. They would turn on each other instead of their prey. And I think we are not his main quarry, or he would have come himself. We were an annoyance, I think. Her tone was calm, but it was clear she did not like being regarded so lightly. And perhaps a little something extra to slip into his game bag, if we were not too much trouble. Still, there is small good in remaining any nearer him than we must. Rand? Perrin asked. He could almost feel Zareen leaning forward to listen. If we are not what he hunts, is it Rand? Perhaps, Moraine said, or perhaps Matt. Remember that he is Taviran also, and he blew the Horn of Valir. Zareen made a strangled sound. He blew it? Someone has found it already? The Aes Sedai ignored her, leaning out of her saddle to stare closely into Perrin's eyes, dark gleaming into burnished gold. Once again, events outpace me. I do not like that. And neither should you. If events outrun me, they may well trample you, and the rest of the world with you. We have many leagues to tear yet, Lan said. The Ogier's suggestion is a good one. He was already in his saddle. After a moment, Moraine straightened and touched the mare's ribs with her heels. She was halfway down the side of the mound before he could get his bow unstrung and take Stepper's reins from Loyal. Burn you, Moraine. I'll find some answers somewhere. Leaning back against a fallen log, Matt enjoyed the warmth of the campfire. The rains had drifted south 3 days earlier, but he still felt damp. Yet right at that moment, he was hardly aware of the dancing flames. He peered thoughtfully at the small wax-covered cylinder in his hand. Tom was engrossed in tuning his harp, muttering to himself of rain and wet, never glancing Matt's way. Crickets chirped in the dark thicket around them. Caught between villages by sunset, they had chosen this copse away from the road. 2 nights they had tried to buy a room for the night. Twice a farmer had loosed his dogs on them. Matt unsheathed his belt knife and hesitated. Luck. It only explodes sometimes, she said. Luck. As carefully as he could, he slid along the length of the tube. It was a tube, and of paper as he had thought. He found bits of paper on the ground after fireworks were set off back home. Layers of paper, but all that filled the inside was something that looked like dirt or maybe tiny gray-black pebbles and dust. He stirred them on his palm with one finger. How in the light could pebbles explode? The light burned me, Tom roared. He thrust his harp into its case as if to protect it from what was in Matt's hand. Are you trying to kill us, boy? Haven't you heard those things explode 10 times as hard for air as for fire? Fireworks are the next thing to Aes Sedai work, boy. Maybe, Matt said. But a Ludra did not look like any Aes Sedai to me. I used to think that about Master Alvir's clock, that it had to be Aes Sedai work. But once I got the back of the cabinet open, I saw it was full of little pieces of metal. He shifted uncomfortably at the memory. Mistress Alvir had been the first to reach him that time, with the wisdom and his father and the mayor all right behind her, and unbelieving he just meant to look. I could have put them all back together. I think Perrin could make one if he saw those little wheels and springs, and I don't know what all. You would be surprised, boy, Tom said dryly. Even a bad clockmaker is a fairly rich man, and they earn it. But a clock does not explode in your face. Neither did this. Well, it is useless now. He tossed the handful of paper and little pebbles into the fire, to a screech from Tom. The pebbles sparkled and made tiny flashes, and there was a smell of acrid smoke. You are trying to kill us. Tom's voice was unsteady, and it rose in intensity and pitch as he spoke. If I decide I want to die, I will go to the royal palace when we reach Caemlyn, and I'll pinch more gays. His long mustaches flailed. Do not do that again. It did not explode, Matt said, frowning at the fire. He fished into the oiled cloth roll on the other side of the log and pulled out a firework of the next larger size. I wonder why there was no bang. I do not care why there was no bang. Do not do it again. Matt glanced at him and laughed. Stop shaking, Tom. There's no need to be afraid. I know what is inside them now. At least I know what it looks like, but... Don't say it. I will not be cutting any more open, Tom. It is more fun to set them off, anyway. I am not afraid, you mud-footed swineherd, Tom said with elaborate dignity. I am shaking with rage because I'm traveling with a goat-brained lout who might kill the pair of us because he cannot think past his own. Ho, the fire! Matt exchanged glances with Tom as horses' hooves approached. It was late for anyone honest to be traveling, but the Queen's guards kept the road safe this close to Caemlyn, and the 4 who rode into the firelight certainly did not look like robbers. One was a woman. The men all wore long cloaks and seemed to be her retainers, while she was pretty and blue-eyed in gold necklace and a gray silk dress and a velvet cloak with a wide hood. The men dismounted. One held her reins and another her stirrup, and she smiled at Matt, doffing her gloves as she came near the fire. I fear we are caught out late, young master, she said, and I would trouble you for directions to an inn if you know one. He grinned and started to rise. He had made it as far as a crouch when he heard one of the men mutter something, and another produced a crossbow from under his cloak, already drawn with a clip holding the bolt. "Kill him, fool!" the woman shouted, and Matt tossed the firework into the flames and threw himself toward his quarterstaff. There was a loud bang and a flash of light. "I said aye!" a man cried. "Fireworks, fool!" the woman shouted, and he rolled to his feet with the staff in his hand to see the crossbow bolt sticking out of the fallen log almost where he had been sitting, and the crossbowman falling with the hilt of one of Tom's knives adorning his chest. It was all he had time to see, for the other two men darted past the fire at him, drawing swords. One of them suddenly stumbled to his knees, dropping his sword to claw at a knife in his back as he fell face down. The last man did not see his companion fall. He obviously expected to be one of a pair, dividing their opponent's attention as he thrust his blade at Matt's middle. Feeling almost contemptuous, Matt cracked the fellow's wrist with one end of his staff, sending the sword flying, and cracked his forehead with the other. The man's eyes rolled up in his head as he collapsed. From the corner of his eye, Matt saw the woman walking toward him, and he stuck a finger at her like a knife. "Fine clothes you wear for a thief, woman. You sit down till I decide what to do with you, or I'll—" She looked as surprised as Matt at the knife that suddenly bloomed in her throat, a red flower of spreading blood. He took a half step as if to catch her as she fell, knowing it was no good. Her long cloak settled over her, covering everything but her face and the hilt of Tom's knife. "Burn you," Matt muttered. "Burn you, Tom Maryland. A woman? Light, we could have tied her up and given her to the Queen's guards tomorrow in Camelin. Light, I might even have let her go. She'd robbed nobody without these three, and the only one that lives will be days before he can see straight and months before he can hold a sword. Burn you, Tom, there was no need to kill her." The gleeman limped to where the woman lay and kicked back her cloak. The dagger had half fallen from her hand, its blade as wide as Matt's thumb, and 2 hands long. "Would you rather I had waited till she nested that in your ribs, boy?" He retrieved his own knife, wiping the blade on her cloak. Matt realized he was humming "She Wore a Mask That Hid Her Face" and stopped it. He bent down and hid hers with the hood of her cloak. "Best we move on," he said quietly. "I do not want to have to explain this if a patrol of the guards happens by." "With her in those clothes," Tom said, "I should say not. They must have robbed a merchant's wife or some noblewoman's carriage." His voice became gentler. "If we're going, boy, you had best see to saddling your horse." Matt gave a start and pulled his eyes from the dead woman. "Yes, I had better, hadn't I?" He didn't look at her again. He had no such compunction about the men. As far as he was concerned, a man who decided to rob and kill deserved what he got when he lost the game. He did not dwell on them, but neither did he jerk his eyes away if they fell on one of the robbers. It was after he had saddled his gelding and tied his things on behind while he was kicking dirt onto the fire that he found himself looking at the man who had shot the crossbow. There was something familiar about those features, about the way the smothering fire made shadows across them. Luck, he told himself. Always the luck. "The crossbowman was a good swimmer, Tom," he said as he climbed into the saddle. "What foolery are you talking now?" The gleeman was on his horse, too, and far more concerned with how his instrument cases rode behind his saddle than he was with the dead. "How could you know whether he could swim at all?" "He made it ashore from a small boat in the middle of the Aranon in the middle of the night. I guess that used up all his luck." He checked the lashings on the roll of fireworks again. "If that fool thought one of these was Aes Sedai, I wonder what he'd have thought if they all went off." "Are you sure, boy? The chances of it being the same man. Why, even you wouldn't lay a wager against those odds." "I am sure, Tom. Elaine, I will wring your neck when I put my hands on you. And Egwene's and Nynaeve's, too. And I am sure I intend to have this bloody letter out of my hands an hour after we reach Camelin." "I tell you there is nothing in that letter, boy. I played Deus Damar when I was younger than you, and I can recognize a code or a cipher even when I don't know what it says. Well, I never played your great game, Tom, your bloody game of houses, but I know when someone is chasing me, and they'd not be chasing me this hard or this far for the gold in my pockets. Not for less than a chest full of gold. It has to be the letter. Burn me, pretty girls always get me in trouble. Do you feel like sleeping tonight after this? With the sleep of an innocent babe, boy. But if you want to ride, I'll ride. The face of a pretty woman floated into Matt's head with a dagger in her throat. You had no luck, pretty woman. Then let's ride, he said savagely. Chapter 45. Camelin. Matt had vague memories of Camelin, but when they approached it in the early hours after sunrise, it seemed as if he had never been there before. They had not been alone on the road since first light, and other riders surrounded them now, and trains of merchants' wagons and folk afoot, all streaming toward the great city. Built on rising hills, it was surely as large as Tarvalon, and outside the huge walls, a 50-foot height of pale grayish stone, streaked with white and silver sparkling in the sun, spaced with tall round towers with the lion banner of Andor waving atop them, white on red. Outside those walls, it seemed as if another great city had been placed, wrapping around the walled city, all red brick and gray stone and white plastered walls. Inns pushed in on houses of 3 and 4 stories so fine they must belong to wealthy merchants. Shops with goods displayed on tables under awnings crowding against wide windowless warehouses. Open markets under red and purple roof tiles along the road on both sides, men and women already crying their wares, bargaining at the top of their voices. While penned calves and sheep and goats and pigs, caged geese and chickens and ducks added to the din. He seemed to remember thinking Camelin was too noisy when he was here before. Now it seemed like a heartbeat pumping wealth. The road led to arched gates 20 feet high, standing open under the watchful eye of red-coated Queen's guards in their shining breastplates. They eyed Tom and him no more than anyone else. Not even the quarterstaff slanted across his saddle in front of him. All they cared was that people keep moving, it seemed. And then they were within. Slender towers here rose even taller than those along the walls, and gleaming domes shone white and gold above streets teeming with people. Just inside the gates, the road split into 2 parallel streets, separated by a wide strip of grass and trees. The hills of the city rose like steps toward a peak, which was surrounded by another wall, shining as white as Tarvalon's, with still more domes and towers within. That was the inner city, Matt recalled, and atop those highest hills stood the royal palace. No point waiting, he told Tom. I'll take the letter straight on. He looked at the sedan chairs and carriages making their way through the crowds, the shops with all their goods displayed. A man could earn some gold in this city, Tom, once he found a game of dice or cards. He was not quite so lucky at cards as at dice, but few except nobles and the wealthy played those games anyway. Now that's who I should find a game with. Tom yawned at him and hitched at his gleeman's cloak as if it were a blanket. We have ridden all night, boy. Let's at least find something to eat first. The Queen's blessing has good meals. He yawned again. And good beds. I remember that, Matt said slowly. He did, in a way. The innkeeper was a fat man with graying hair, Master Gill. Moraine had caught up to Rand and him there, when he had thought they were finally free of her. She's off playing her game with Rand now. Nothing to do with me, not anymore. I will meet you there, Tom. I said I'd have this letter out of my hands an hour after I arrived, and I mean to. You go on. Tom nodded and turned his horse aside, calling over his shoulder through a yawn. Do not become lost, boy. It's a big city, Camelin. And a rich one. Matt heeled his mount on up the crowded street. Lost. I can find my bloody way. The sickness appeared to have erased parts of his memory. He could look at an inn, its upper floors sticking out over the ground floor all the way around, and its sign creaking in the breeze, and remember seeing it before, yet not recall another thing he could see from that spot. 100 paces of street might abruptly spark in his memory, while the parts before and after remained as mysterious as dice still in the cup. Even with the holes in his memory, he was sure he had never been to the inner city or the royal palace. I couldn't forget that. Yet he did not need to remember the way. The streets of the new city, he remembered that name suddenly. It was the part of Camelin less than 2,000 years old, ran every which way, but the main boulevards all led to the inner city. The guards at the gates made no effort to stop anyone. Within those white walls were buildings that could have almost fit in Tarvalin. The curving streets topped hills to reveal thin towers, their tiled walls sparkling with 100 colors in the sunlight, or to look down on parks laid out in patterns made to be viewed from above, or to show sweeping vistas across the entire city to the rolling plains and forests beyond. It did not really matter which streets he took. They all spiraled in on what he sought, the royal palace of Andor. In no time, he found himself crossing the huge oval plaza before the palace, riding toward its tall, gilded gates. The pure white palace of Andor would certainly not have been out of place among Tarvalin's wonders, with its slender towers and golden domes shining in the sun, its high balconies and intricate stonework. The gold leaf on one of those domes could have kept him in luxury for a year. There were fewer people in the plaza than elsewhere, as if it were reserved for great occasions. A dozen of the guards stood before the closed gates, bows slanted, all at exactly the same angle, across their gleaming breastplates, faces hidden by the steel bars of their burnished helmets' face guards. A heavy-set officer, with his red cloak thrown back to reveal a knot of gold braid on his shoulder, was walking up and down the line, eyeing each man as if he thought he might find rust or dust. Matt drew rein and put on a smile. "Good morning to you, Captain." The officer turned, staring at him through the bars of his face guard with deep, beady eyes like a pudgy rat in a cage. The man was older than he had expected, surely old enough to have more than one knot of rank, and fat rather than stocky. "What do you want, farmer?" he demanded roughly. Matt drew a breath. "Make it good. Impress this fool so he doesn't keep me waiting all day. I don't want to have to flash the Armerlin's paper around to keep from kicking my heels. I come from Tarvalin, from the White Tower, bearing a letter from—" "You come from Tarvalin, farmer?" The fat officer's stomach shook as he laughed, but then his laughter cut off as if severed with a knife, and he glared. "We want no letters from Tarvalin, rogue, if you have such a thing. Our good queen, may the light illumine her, will take no word from the White Tower until the daughter heir is returned to her. I never heard of any messenger from the tower wearing a countryman's coat and breeches. It is plain to me you are up to some trick, perhaps thinking you'll find a few coins if you come claiming to carry letters. But you'll be lucky if you don't end in a prison cell. If you do come from Tarvalin, go back and tell the tower to return the daughter heir before we come and take her. If you're a trickster after silver, get out of my sight, before I have you beaten within an inch of your life. Either way, you half-wit looby, be gone." Matt had been trying to edge a word in from the beginning of the man's speech. He said quickly, "The letter is from her, man. It's from—" "Did I not tell you to be gone, ruffian?" the fat man bellowed. His face was growing nearly as red as his coat. "Take yourself out of my sight, you gutter scum. If you are not gone by the time I count 10, I will arrest you for littering the plaza with your presence. 1, 2. Can you count so high, you fat fool?" Matt snapped. "I tell you, Elaine said—" "Guards!" The officer's face was purple now. "Seize this man for a dark friend!" Matt hesitated a moment. Sure, no one could take such a charge seriously, but the red-coated guards dashed toward him, all dozen men in breastplates and helmets, and he wheeled his horse and galloped ahead of them, followed by the fat man's shouts. The gelding was no racer, but it outdistanced men afoot easily enough. People dodged out of his way along the curving streets, shaking fists after him and shouting as many curses as the officer had. "Fool," he thought, meaning the fat officer, then added another for himself. All I had to do was say her bloody name in the beginning. "Elaine, the daughter heir of Andor, sends this letter to her mother, Queen Morghese." Light! Who could have thought they'd think that way about Tarvalin? From what he remembered of his last visit, Aes Sedai and the White Tower had been close behind Queen Morghese in the guard's affections. "Burn her. Elaine could have told me." Reluctantly, he added, I could have asked questions, too. Before he reached the arched gates that led out into the new city, he slowed to a walk. He did not think the guards from the palace could still be chasing him. There was no point in attracting the eyes of those at the gate by galloping through, but they looked at him no more now than when he had first entered. As he rode under the broad arch, he smiled and almost turned back. He had suddenly remembered something and had an idea that appealed to him a good deal more than walking through the palace gates. Even if that fat officer had not been watching the gates, he thought he would like it better. He became lost twice while searching for the Queen's blessing, but at last he found the sign with a man kneeling before a woman with red gold hair and a crown of golden roses, her hand on his head. It was a broad stone building of 3 stories, with tall windows even up under the red roof tiles. He rode around back to the stable yard, where a horse-faced fellow in a leather vest that could hardly be any tougher than his skin took his horse's reins. He thought he remembered the fellow. Yes, Ramey. It has been a long time, Ramey. Matt tossed him a silver mark. You remember me, don't you? Can't say as I... Ramey began, then caught the shine of the silver where he had expected copper. He coughed, and his short nod turned into something that combined a knuckled forehead with a jerky bow. Why, of course I do, young master. Forgive me, slipped my mind. Mind no good for people, good for horses. I know horses, I do. A fine animal, young master. I'll take good care of him, you can be sure. He delivered it all quickly, with no room for Matt to say a word, then hurried the gelding into the stable before he might have to come up with Matt's name. With a sour grimace, Matt put the fat roll of fireworks under his arm and shouldered the rest of his belongings. Fellow couldn't tell me from Hawkwing's toenails. A bulky, muscular fellow was sitting on an upturned barrel beside the door to the kitchen, gently scratching the ear of a black and white cat crouched on his knee. The man studied Matt with heavy-lidded eyes, especially the quarterstaff across his shoulder. But he never stopped his scratching. Matt thought he remembered him, but he could not bring up a name. He said nothing as he went through the door, and neither did the man. No reason they should remember me. Probably have bloody eye, said I, coming for people every day. In the kitchen, 2 undercooks and 3 scullions were darting between stoves and roasting spits under the direction of a round woman with her hair in a bun and a long wooden spoon that she used to point out what she wanted done. Matt was sure he remembered the round woman. Colleen. What a name for a woman that wide. But everybody called her Cook. Well, Cook, he announced, I am back, and not a year since left. She peered at him a moment, then nodded. I remember you. He began to grin. You were with that young prince, weren't you? She went on. The one who looked so like Tigraine. The light illumined her memory. You're a serving man, aren't you? Is he coming back, then, the young prince? No, he said curtly. A prince? What? I do not think he will be any time soon, and I don't think you would like it if he did. She protested, saying what a fine, handsome young man the prince was. Burn me, is there a woman anywhere who doesn't moon over Rand and make calf eyes if you mention his bloody name? She'd bloody scream if she knew what he is doing now. But he refused to let her get it out. Is Master Gill about, and Tom Maryland? In the library, she said with a tight sniff. You tell Basil Gill when you see him that I said those drains need cleaning. Today, mind. She caught sight of something one of the undercooks was doing to a beef roast and waddled over to her. Not so much, child. You'll make the meat too sweet if you put so much arrath on it. She seemed to have forgotten that already. He shook his head as he went in search of this library he could not remember. He could not remember that Colleen was married to Master Gill either. But if he had ever heard a good wife send instructions to her husband, that had been it. A pretty serving girl with big eyes giggled and directed him down a hall beside the common room. When he stepped into the library, he stopped and stared. There had to be more than 300 books on the shelves built on the walls, and more lying on the tables. He had never seen so many books in one place in his life. He noticed a leather-bound copy of the Travels of Jane Farstrider on a table near the door. He'd always meant to read that. Rand and Perrin had always been telling him things out of it. But he never did seem to get around to reading the books he meant to read. Pink-faced Basil Gill and Tom Maryland were seated at one of the tables, facing each other across a stones board, pipes in their teeth, trailing thin blue streamers of tobacco smoke. A calico cat sat on the table beside a wooden dice cup, her tail curled over her feet, watching them play. The gleeman's cloak was nowhere in sight, so Matt supposed he had already gotten a room. "You're done sooner than I expected, boy," Tom said around his pipe stem. He tugged one long white mustache as he considered where to place his next stone on the board's crosshatchings. "Basil, you remember Matt Cawthon?"
I remember, the fat innkeeper said, peering at the board. Sickly the last time you were here, I recall. I hope you are better now, lad.
"I am better," Matt said. "Is that all you remember? That I was sick?" Master Gill winced at Tom's move and took his pipe out of his mouth.
Considering who you left with, lad, and considering the way things are now, maybe it's best I remember no more than that.
"Aye, said I, not in such good odor now, are they?" Matt set his things in one big armchair, the quarterstaff propped against the back, and himself in another with one leg swinging over the arm. "The guards at the palace seemed to think the White Tower had stolen Elaine." Tom eyed the roll of fireworks uneasily, smoking pipe, and muttered to himself before going back to his study of the board.
Hardly that, Gill said. But the whole city knows she disappeared from the tower. Tom says she's returned, but we've heard none of that here. Perhaps Morghese knows, but everyone down to a stable boy is stepping lightly so she doesn't snap off his head. Lord Gabriel has kept her from actually sending anyone to the headsman, but I'd not say she would not do it. And he has certainly not soothed her temper toward Tarvalon. If anything, I think he has made it worse.
"Morghese has a new advisor," Tom said in a dry voice. "Gareth Bryn did not like him, so Bryn has been retired to his estate to watch his sheep grow wool. Basil, are you going to place a stone or not?"
In a moment, Tom. In a moment. I want to set it right.
Gill clamped his teeth around his pipe stem and frowned at the board, puffing up smoke. "So the Queen has an advisor who doesn't like Tarvalon," Matt said. "Well, that explains the way the guards acted when I said I came from there."
If you told them that, Gill said, you might be lucky you escaped without any broken bones.
If it was any of the new men, at least.
Gabriel has replaced half the guards in Canaan with men of his choosing. That is no mean feat, considering how short a time he has been here. Some say Morghese may marry him.
He started to put a stone on the board, then took it back with a shake of his head.
Times change, people change. Too much change for me. I suppose I'm growing old.
"You seem to mean us both to grow old before you place a stone," Tom muttered. The cat stretched and slinked across the table for him to stroke her back. "Talking all day will not let you find a good move. Why don't you just admit defeat, Basil?"
I never admit defeat, Gill said stoutly. I'll beat you yet, Tom.
I appreciate all y'all.
He set a white stone on the intersection of two lines.
Next to me,
You will see.